Haters, they wanna hate, and fellas, they wanna lay. They want 'em all. Shot callers, we want 'em all. Haters, they wanna hate, and we want 'em all. All right, Rockfin, on time.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
Dooby-dooby-doo. All right. Welcome, guys. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Sabby Sabs Podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs Podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. I want to give a shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble, and welcome back, guys. Welcome. Do want to give everybody a quick update. If you are not on Twitter, my comrade JB at RBN is still in the hospital. This is why we haven't had the JB and Sabby show the past 2 Thursdays, because he is still there. Now, he did reach out to us earlier today, and he told us that he may have to have surgery. I can talk a little bit more about that on Call In tonight, but I think at some point he may make his own announcement, but just giving you guys an update about that, because I know some of you saw his Twitter post. We are, of course, wishing him the best, and it's not a fun time, obviously, for him right now. And you guys know how our healthcare system is, so just keep that in mind as well. But we are wishing JB the best. So again, I can talk a little bit more about that on Call In later tonight, but I did want to go ahead and give you guys the update about that. So we have quite a bit to discuss tonight, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be an interesting show. Tonight's theme is winners and losers, and I think you will get to decide who is winning and who is losing. So we have a good show tonight, and we will do Call In, of course, after the show. I want to get started with some of the comments here in the chat. Greetings, R. Finnegan. No, inflation is not affected by this. R. Finnegan coming in right out the gate. The current inflation situation was caused by overprinting dollars by the Federal Reserve. Interesting. Shout out to Ada Matan. The opposite. Printing money does not cause inflation. The only thing that can cause inflation is companies deciding to raise their prices because of greed. There is no pricing fairy that goes around changing prices. Oh, well, this is going to be an interesting discussion tonight when we get to the proposed Stimmy comment. Shout out to Official People's Party USA. Yes, printing money makes its value worth less. So yes, it does contribute to inflation. Oh boy, everybody's in it. Shout out to Squeal, says MMT is modern monetary theory. Yes, it is. Oh, there's a long conversation in the chat about that. Shout out to CBC Voters, says happy Thursday, Sabby Sabs and Eric Red. Greetings, foolish coyote. In fact, the only reason why people are taxed is to give money value. Facts. I guess we're going to be talking about money a lot tonight. Greetings, a random Anna. Happy Thursday all from Friday morning. Oh, you must be abroad. Shout out to Dave's, just as I have said. Rachel Maddow has predicted on her show that Trump supporters will vote Democratic in 2026 and 2028 because of Trump's policies. I disagree. The Green Party will win in 2026. There's a number of Green Party candidates that are running during the midterms. We should have some of them on the show coming up shortly, but shout out to Dave. Greetings, Simply Anthony. I was about to say Simply Anthony Good. Happy Thursday. Your breakdown of Hakeem Jeffries was so informative. I did not know he was related to Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Yeah, I think some people just weren't aware of that. But thank you so much for that. I've gotten a number of emails from people about that episode that they weren't aware of what Hakeem was actually doing. Greetings, DJ Leader. Terrific Tuesday to Sabby and fam. I saw a post reel from JB about surgery tomorrow. Yep. But it was taken down, sending positive energy and love to our RBN brother. Yeah. And I talked about that at the beginning of the show. Shout out to Hannah, says, I don't like Trump, but I'll take another stimulus check. Oh my gosh. Danny is laughing there at Hannah. It's very, very interesting. Greetings. Kwani says, I'm going to email the video to Sabby. It was beautiful and is a great visual. She was telling them they were not real Jewish people, and many people supported the gentleman. It was awesome seeing the truth. Oh, well, send that email to me. Shout out to Lawrence, free Palestine. Greetings, Missing says Trump giving $5,000. Well, there's a proposal and we'll get into that tonight. And you guys will have to tell me if you think this is actually going to happen. We'll get into that tonight. Robert, what's up? Trump announced the rebate to a room full of rich people and they went silent. Of course. Yes, they did. Greetings, Mark, says Sabby. Shout out to Topher, says Glenn made Crenshaw look like a baby throwing a tantrum. That guy is cringe, right? Dan Crenshaw, he's pretty cringe. Shout out to Kimi, says good evening, fam. Good evening, Eric. And of course, the hostess with the mostest, Sabby Sabs. Let's go. Thank you so much, Kimi. Greetings, Chrome, says peace, love, Sabby. Shout out to Larez. Sup, Sabby, Eric, Corey, and RB and fam. The pod save guys are all establishment chills. Was funny when he checked smash the like, y'all. Yeah, that's a good episode. Shout out to Fire, says I love silent rich people. 5K stem would prop up my entire biz. Push over the hill to awesome right now. I think $5,000 would help a lot of people right now, because the prices are still just ridiculous. The eggs, I'm noticing, you guys, if you've been to the grocery store, like the eggs are limited. At least they are here. So I think that could benefit people. That could go a far way. Shout out to Beyond Ebony, says doobie doo. And shout out there to Kimi. And greetings, of course, my producer, Eric T. Red, says, here we go, go, go. And I want to give a shout out to New Orleans in the house. Shout out to Kev, says New Orleans checking in. All right. I have never been to New Orleans and I still want to go. And I'll have to figure out what I'm going to eat there, because a lot of I can't have gumbo. I can't do spicy food. So I have to figure out what I should eat in New Orleans that's not spicy, but is like a New Orleans thing. And greetings, Sakina says, hello, Sabby in chat. Shout out to C. Shata says, a Sabby. All right. We have, again, so much to dive into. I want to go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you, fam, holding down the fort, doing the damn thing. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate. We have Sabinators. Don't forget about those Sabsters. And of course, there's also Sabbies. Okay. Don't forget about them. Oh my God, I just did the okay. South Park in the house. Okay. And of course, we also have members. Thank you guys so much. All of their names are listed here, and you can see their names also scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a shout out to newbies. We call them newbies over here, the new patrons. Special shout out here to Sajad Nasir. Welcome and thank you so much. Hey, hey, hey. Based. All right, guys. I can't wait. I'm so excited for tonight's show because I was just like, man, we got some things to discuss. Some things to discuss. So again, the theme tonight is winners and losers, and you'll tell me who you think is winning and who is losing. We'll show you the topics that we are going to discuss, ladies and gentlemen. It's quite interesting mix here. Tonight, we are discussing Donald Trump floats 5K stimulus. And so this is like it's a big story here. And cutting the Pentagon budget. We're going to dive into a little bit more of what's happening there with Doge, if there's going to be any benefit there for the American people. And then I'm also going to, of course, explain to you some of the things that I don't agree with that's happening that has been recently announced. We're also going to discuss, if you aren't aware of this one, this is a big one. I told you 2025 is going to be the year of lawsuits. That's what it seems like, or cases. ASAP Rocky wins. This was a huge announcement yesterday. ASAP Rocky, who is a rapper and is also, of course, Rihanna's boo thing. He is in having good news, very, very good news. We're also going to discuss here Glenn Greenwald checks warmonger. Jesus Christ. Glenn Greenwald going against Dan Crenshaw there. That was brutal, brutal. But Glenn really, I think, in my opinion, knocked him out. But there's one thing I'm going to talk about with that story. There was one thing that I felt like Piers Morgan tried to stick onto Glenn Greenwald that I'm going to dive into. There's something else I think that Glenn should have said that maybe he didn't think about at the time. You know how debates can be, but I'll mention that. We're also going to discuss, oh my God, this is going around the internet. The Pod Save Bro is checked. That is the gentleman there in the green square next to Stephen A. Smith. I think Stephen A. Smith told him what he needed to hear. And now Stephen A. Smith is getting a lot of resentment, in particular from James Carville. It is crazy. I'm pretty sure Stephen A. Smith will probably issue a response to James Carville, but I felt like that was exactly what Pod Save America and everyone else who saw that interview needed to hear. And last but not least, this one's a sneaky one. Billionaire kills small business. So you may not be aware of that gentleman there in the magenta square at the end. That is Gerald Chan. And not many people know about him, but by the end of the show tonight, you are going to know a lot about him and why you should be concerned about Gerald Chan. So we have so much to discuss tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Again, the theme is winners and losers. Start us off right by smashing that like button, fam. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we're going to go ahead and dive in. This is a mini deep dive. But we're deeping. We're deeping. We're going to start off with the first story tonight, ladies and gentlemen, here. When you think about billionaires, you probably think about people like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. Those are the easy ones to spot. I think a lot of people are familiar with them. But a lot of billionaires are unknown. There are many of them walking among us, and you would probably never even know that they are a billionaire. In fact, most billionaires go under the radar. And that cannot be further from the truth with billionaire Gerald Chen. Now, a lot of you probably have not heard of him because it's a local situation here for me. That's why I'm familiar with Gerald Chen. And I want to explain to you what he is doing and how he is hurting small businesses, how he is hurting, of course, entrepreneurs, and how this can affect other people as well, even if you don't live here. Something very interesting about some of these billionaires is that they tend to donate, right? They tend to donate to universities. Sometimes they'll donate to a hospital, and the hospital will name a whole like medical wing after them. They tend to contribute to philanthropy. Yeah, I always kind of call that a cover. I kind of do in a way. It's like, so they can be known for their philanthropy so that you're not focused on the fact that they have exploited workers. And that is also the case for Gerald Chen. I want to take you back a couple of years ago. Now we're going to go way back. September 2014, when Gerald Chen donated money to Harvard. Listen to this.
Reuters reports that Hong Kong real estate billionaires Ronnie and Gerald Chen have donated $350 million to Harvard University. The donation has been channeled through the brothers' charity group, the Morningside Foundation. The principal beneficiary of the $350 million gift is the university's School of Public Health.
Pause. Now, hearing that part, it sounds like, oh, this is a generous person. They're donating to Harvard University, but it's actually not uncommon for an alum of Harvard to donate money to Harvard, especially if they go on to become a billionaire. That's not uncommon. But if you notice what that commentator said, he said that this is done through the Morningside group. And this is another thing I want you to be aware of. It's not uncommon for people who have a lot of money. When they do make a donation, it's either an anonymous donation or it's done through another group. So that way, sometimes you can't always link things back to them or whatever. They have different ways of doing this. They're also known for setting up shell companies, similar here with Gerald Chen and his friend as well. So when you hear this, it sounds like he's a great person. It sounds like he's doing stuff that people would approve of, donating money. I mean, why would you be against that, right? But that was just the beginning. That was just the beginning.
Ronnie and Gerald Chen are two of the richest people in Hong Kong, with combined net worth of about $3 billion US. Their main source of wealth is the Hong Leong Group, which is engaged in property development and management, car park management, and dry cleaning businesses. The company is the largest real estate company in Hong Kong. Its main properties are the Standard Chartered Bank Building and the Grand Center in Tsim Sha Tsui. The billionaire brothers established the Morningside Foundation in 1996 to support higher education in North America and Asia.
Pause. So one of the things he said there, you'll notice that they started with real estate development in Hong Kong first, and then made their way to real estate development here in the United States. Let's continue.
According to the Reuters report, the donation by Morningside Foundation has no restrictions and conditions, but will focus on supporting efforts such as increased financial aid for students, loan forgiveness for graduates who work in underserved areas, new classrooms, and seed money for path-breaking research too novel to win support from other funders.
Sounds good, right? I mean, all of that sounds positive. You're helping students get financial aid. You're donating money to the university. You're trying to give back because that was his alma mater. So it looks like he's doing something that's really great, right? Now, that was 2014. But then the real agenda eventually comes to light. Gerald Chan's real goal here was to buy up businesses in Harvard Square. Now, this is something that people have been warning about for, I've been here since 2011 in Eastern Massachusetts. So like in the Boston area, I started hearing about foreign investors buying real estate in Boston, Cambridge, Somerville area. It was around 2013 when I started to hear about it. And I want to show you what has happened. There was a warning that was sent out, and this warning actually came from the Harvard Crimson about Gerald Chan. Hong Kong billionaire buys up Harvard Square real estate. So I remember this business right here called Upstairs on the Square. That was another one of those little, cool, like divey restaurant, bar, pub type places right there in Harvard Square in the heart of it all. And then one day I noticed that it closed. And like many other businesses have had to close. But why? It goes on to say here, all of the property at this time in 2014 that was bought by Gerald Chan. So if you look at Harvard Square, you'll see over here on JFK Street, 33.15 million, 31.7 million, 16 million. So that's all right next to each other there, right? So if we move over a little bit, Bow Street, 2.95 million. Mass Ave, 5.9 million. Remington Street, 8.3 million. And then over here, of course, on Mass Ave as well, 13 million. That was in 2014. That's how many properties Gerald Chan purchased in that 1 year. And he has continued to do so since then. Now, what do you think happens to the other properties that are in that area when a billionaire comes in and he buys up the property and this is what they do. They buy up the property, they renovate it, they increase the rent. What do you think happens to the other properties that are next to it? Their rent is going to increase too. Think about that when we get to small business owners. This was the warning sent out. Billionaire Hong Kong investor and Harvard School of Public Health alum Gerald Chan has made waves in Harvard Square in recent months with purchase of Square real estate totaling more than $100 million. His acquisitions include the property at Winthrop Square, which houses Grendel's Den, and recently closed Upstairs on the Square, a recently vacated American Express building, and the stretch of property from 18 to 28 JFK Street, which includes Uno's and Papria's. One of Chan's most recent purchases is 39 JFK Street, the former home of Leo's Place Diner and the American Express office, both of which closed after the transfer of ownership. Everybody hear this? According to an article in Banker and Tradesman, Chan paid $33.15 million for the property. So notice how these businesses, some of those, again, Leo's Place Diner, small mom and pop place, notice how they had to close after he purchased the property. That's because they can't afford the rent. It goes on to say Hong Kong to Harvard. Real estate is nothing new for Chan, who is a non-executive director at Hang Lung Properties Limited, one of the largest real estate companies in Hong Kong. He also works alongside his brother here. The brothers are ranked 17th on Forbes magazine, Hong Kong's 50 richest list. According to Banker and Tradesman article, Chan made his purchases through a series of shell companies, which are all connected to Morningside Group, Chan's investment company. Now we're moving a little bit here, and it talks about him, being an alum. They go on to say that Chan's Morningside Group established the Morningside Professorship in radiobiology at the John B. Little Center for Radiation and Science Environmental Health at HSPH in 2012. Similar to his connections at HSPH, Chan has had ties to Harvard Square since his days as a student and recently purchased a home on Brattle Street. Now, let me pause there for a second. Most people here cannot afford to purchase a home in Cambridge, and especially not in Harvard Square. Harvard Square is expensive. And sometimes people point fingers at the law students and they say it's their fault because they're willing to pay a lot in rent, but it's not just the law students. What you have to understand is that when you have a billionaire like Gerald Chan that comes in and he buys up all these different properties, and even if he's going to turn this into an office or something like that, it doesn't matter because it still affects the housing in the area. So if you live in an apartment building that is next to one of the buildings that Gerald Chan purchased, that means that your rent is going going to increase too. And the fact that this guy can come in and he can just buy a house on Brattle Street, this is insane. I know a lot of people here who can't afford to even rent in Harvard Square. So keep that in mind. He is killing the working class. Everybody has to see this for what this really is. It goes on to say here, out with the old, despite exciting changes brought by the transitions in ownership, many of Chan's purchases have been followed by the departure of longtime tenants. The market is whatever the market is, that's coming from Jillison. Any purchaser and any developer can pay whatever they deem appropriate. And that lies the problem. Any developer can come in and pay whatever they want. And that means that your rent is going to increase. And that means if you own a small business within that area, that means your rent for that business is going to increase. And this is how slowly but surely over time, people like Gerald Chan have caused small businesses in Harvard Square to go out of business. And that's what he wants. He wants you to go out of business so then he can buy it and turn it into whatever he wants. Not to mention a lot of these buildings that he bought and he said he was going to create something with are still vacant. Now, I don't know if everyone here has ever been to Harvard Square or is familiar with that area, the Cambridge area. But if you are local and you're from here, then you do know that Harvard Square has changed over the past 10 years. It's very different than when I first moved here in 2011. Now, when you walk through Harvard Square, most of the businesses, the mom and pop places that had been there for decades are gone. Not because they wanted to leave, but because they couldn't afford to stay there because of people like Gerald Chan. Now, when you walk through Harvard Square, what you see are a lot of vacant office spaces, vacant buildings that Gerald Chan bought, and they're not even being used. And I know it's Harvard, and I know it's an expensive university, but what I'm telling you is this is not new. People are doing this in college areas. People are doing this in low income areas, buying these buildings, just purchasing them outright and causing the people in the neighborhood to have an increase of rent, and they can't afford to live there anymore. And the businesses can't afford to stay there anymore. So now instead of having so-and-so Shake Shack or Bobby's Burgers, they're being replaced, and they're being replaced by another Starbucks as if you need another one. They're being replaced by another Pinkberry as if you need another one. So slowly but surely over time, this neighborhood that had more mom and pop restaurants and businesses is starting to become very generic, and is starting to look like your typical cookie cutter area. We'll go on a little bit more here. It says iconic Cambridge bar and restaurant upstairs on the square was the first establishment to shut down after Chan's acquisitions of property. See, that was one I told you about. It goes on to say after 31 years of business, the restaurant announces closing soon after Chan purchased the property. So 31 years, a mom and pop business, 31 years, just done, just like that. Because of Gerald Chan. And this is where you can see the sign here. I remember this was on the window. Upstairs on the square has closed. Thank you for your support. There's been many of them, right? So that was just one of them at that point in time. It says also after 9 years in the square, Indian Bistro Tamarind Bay was forced to close its doors when the restaurant's rent doubled following Chan's purchase of the property at 75 Winthrop Street. That was another mom and pop business gone because of Gerald Chan. The space will be occupied by Night Market. It goes on and brings up what was supposed to replace that, which was going to be a Japanese restaurant operated by Gerald Chan's son. So Gerald Chan pushed out the Indian restaurant, which had been there for 9 years. And that opened up the door for his son to come in and open his own business. How is this fair? How is this right? Some things never change. In spite of all the closures, Chan said he's working to preserve the culture of Harvard Square. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a typical response from these investors that come in and they destroy these communities. They all say that they're going to preserve the culture, but they don't. That's a talking point. They push the people out. Here's another one here. It says, there was one here with Grindel's Den. This is a very popular place in Harvard Square. It says that they had no plans to change occupancy, according to Carrie, who was the co-owner and general manager at that time. Their lease didn't end until 2020. I don't even know if those are the same people that own Grindel's Den at this point in time. So they were, and this goes on, but they were sounding the alarm about Gerald Chan, the billionaire, and how he was basically killing small businesses back in 2014. And now we fast forward to 2025. And here's another one. Closure of a beloved bar in Harvard Square prompts questions about the landlord. I'll let you guys guess. Who do you think the landlord was? Right? Guess. Who became the landlord? Now, I have been to this establishment many a nights. It's a dive bar type feel. It's very chill. Whitney's in Harvard Square. It's cheap. So especially if you're a college student, a lot of the college students come there because it's cheap, it's affordable, and it's a pretty chill place. Not anymore because of Gerald Chan. We're going to get into what happened. This happened this year. This just happened. In late December, Dan McGuire said goodbye to friends and longtime patrons of Whitney's of Harvard Square and locked the doors for good. I didn't find out about this until this year. Whitney's was one of the neighborhood's oldest establishments, a mainstay on busy JFK Street since 1953. McGuire was forced to close after losing an eviction battle with his landlord, billionaire Gerald Chan. So here we go again. Here we have a business that had been there since 1953, and just like that, they have to close because of Gerald Chan. These aren't new businesses, you guys. These are staples in the community that have been there for decades. And just like that, they had to pack up and leave because they couldn't afford to stay there anymore. This is a problem. And no one stopped it. No one. The city of Cambridge didn't come in and stop Gerald Chan from buying up all these properties. There needs to be some type of law about that. Why are all of these investors, he's another foreign investor, coming in, buying up all the property and destroying small businesses? That's not right. But they allowed it to happen. So part of this blame is on Gerald Chan, but part of this blame is on the city of Cambridge for allowing this to happen, for not having any laws in place that would stop it. A spokesperson for Chan says McGuire owed $44,000 in past due rent. See, this is what they try to do. But McGuire countered that he withheld rent following a dispute over upgrades to the building's electricity system. He claims Chan wanted him out because his bar doesn't fit Chan's profile. Now, I am more willing to believe McGuire because in Massachusetts, you actually do have more rights as a tenant, right? You have more rights. So if there are electrical issues in the building, as the landlord, you are supposed to fix those issues. If you do not fix it, yes, the tenant they have a right to withhold their rent. That's Massachusetts law. So how is it that Gerald Chan was able to evict this guy? No one is stopping these billionaires. No one is stopping them from destroying working class people, from destroying their businesses, from destroying their housing, from destroying their lives. There's no check in place here. McGuire was right because he knew the law. Chan owns about 13 properties in Harvard Square. See, it's 13 now. See how we went up? Making him second only to Harvard University, when it comes to property ownership in the neighborhood, according to Harvard Square Business Association. So this is a problem. Some community members worry the once vibrant urban center filled with local shops is losing its character. The city has tried to step in to address the issues of vacant properties and intimidation tactics. Business owners and leaders say problems have accelerated with Chan's real estate investments. His companies have purchased some 170 million in property since 2012, according to the Harvard Business Association. So they are upset about it losing its character, but the reality is the main anger should be towards the fact that you have a billionaire that came in and bought up all of these properties. And that's part of the reason why the character has been destroyed, but he put people out of business. He put small business owners out of business. Do you know how much it costs to try to get a business in Harvard Square today? It didn't cost as much in 1953. That's why Whitney's was able to do it. Working class people open a small bar and say, we're just going to make this a bar and do the thing. So this is corruption. And I don't want to hear it from the city of Cambridge. It's just like, well, we tried to put pressure. No, there needs to be some type of a limitation for people being able to buy up all these buildings. They're pricing people out. And if it's happening here, I know it's happening where you are as well. This is not unique to Cambridge. It's happening in DC, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Raleigh, North Carolina. It's spreading. Now he's sneaky because he likes to stay under the radar for the most part. Most people have never heard of this guy, and that's the way he likes it. But he's buying up all of this stuff. This is terrible. And if the city of Cambridge doesn't put something in place, this is going to continue. There is no accountability here, and there's no limitation on these billionaires just buying up property and putting people out of their homes. Now, we talk about the working class, and we talk about entrepreneurship, and we talk about people having a dream and saying, you know what, I want to own my own business. I want my own brick and mortar, and people working hard to get the money, to get the loan, to be able to do those things. And all it takes is for one person who's a billionaire to come in, and all of a sudden what you had and what you built is gone. That's not a black thing. That's not a white thing. That's not a Democrat thing. That's not a Republican thing. That's a billionaire thing. I have tried to tell people over and over again the danger about this and what we're running into just as a society. If we don't put a stop to this, the American dream is already gone, right? The American dream is already gone. But if we don't put a stop to this, ladies and gentlemen, what's going to be left? So when we talk about winners and losers, I would say that the losers are working class people because they're losing their mom and pop businesses. They're losing their apartments. They're having to move. And unfortunately, unless something changes about the corruption that we have within this system, Gerald Chan and other billionaires like him will continue to be the winners. Share this with a friend. He might be coming to your area soon. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Skylar says, yep, it's absolutely happening in and around Los Angeles. Yeah, buddy. It's a problem. Rondo says Baltimore. There you go. Let's go to some of the other comments here. Cloudness says, Ayo, happy Pisces season. Salute to Sabby and Eric T. Red. Big ups to all the real ones. What's going on, Cloudness? Yes, it's Pisces season. It is. Thank you, Nas M. Love the lipstick. What is it called? Anastasia. Thank you. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, to be honest. So thanks. Delia C. Sabby, thank you for your work. Thanks to you, I've joined Worker Strike Back. Oh, I'm attending their conference this weekend in Seattle. Big ups for Delia. Big ups for Delia. Are we bringing in the music? We got to bring in the music for Delia. Woo! All right, Delia. That's what I'm talking about. All right. Dropped a little beat there for Delia. Congrats. Thank you, the crazy puppet. Click like, thumbs up if you aren't drone. Hashtag asking for a friend. Thank you, the crazy puppet. Irish lady said, I lived in Massachusetts all my life. Rents are ridiculous. 100. Thank you, Gamble. The Harvard Square Theater has been closed since 2012. For many, the irony of the words on the marquee, onward and upward we go, is inescapable. GBH. Thank you, Naya. Same thing is happening in Chapel Hill. What'd I tell you? They're coming to your colleges too. They're coming to those areas. The Oracle said this is predatory capitalism. The big fish consume everything in the aquarium before all is said and done. And thank you, Gamble. Predatory billionaires popping up like Hydra. I know, right? Really? Like for reals. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let's go on. We're moving on to the next story, ladies and gentlemen. Again, the theme is winners and losers, and you let me know who you think the winners and the losers are. This story with Doge, it's two parts, right? One big story, but two parts. There's some news coming out. Now, apparently, it seems like Donald Trump is proposing some type of stimulus for the American people. Now, this is in connection to all this, I guess, spending and or what they call waste that they have discovered. And when you do the math, it has been reported that this would be $5,000, I guess, per household. How much money that has just been wasted, the government has wasted, or either they can't track. I told you that the Treasury Department, they weren't tracking money, etc. So there's a lot of talk here about the stimulus. And actually, before that was announced, I saw this demand from Dr. Dee Curtis. Let's go ahead and start with her. And I wonder, part of me wonders, did Donald Trump see this? And maybe is that why he decided maybe we should give out a stimulus? Now, from what I understand, she supported Donald Trump. Listen to this.
Hi, I am Dr. Dee Curtis, and if you followed me before, you know that I do commentary on what's going on in our country as well as what's going on across the world. Anyway, today I found out that our U.S. Treasury has somehow misplaced $4.7 trillion because the expenses that they had incurred were not coded correctly according to government accounting principles. Therefore, I'm asking that each American taxpayer that is contributed to our tax base be refunded money to recover some of the losses that we have incurred from an incompetent government system that has failed their fiduciary responsibilities to take care of us. I am asking that every person that's on Social Security, first of all, that they receive $50,000 minimum in Social Security starting June 1st of 2025, and that Social Security can start at the age of 62. If we can fund what I just heard was $8 billion for Bill Gates out of USAID and hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars for organizations like the World Health Organization, organizations that we are no longer a part of, then American taxpayers must receive refunds. And so
let me pause here for just a second. I thought this was very interesting because she came in very strong with her demands. And this is what my producer, Eric, and I talk about when we talk about making demands. She came in very strong with her demands. She even gave a date of when she thought that this should start. Now, some of the numbers that have been reported by Doge, they have been debunked. Like there have been counters to those numbers saying the numbers have been exaggerated. But regardless, there has been waste. There has been government spending that either has not been accounted for or has been spent in a wasteful way. So I think we do deserve that transparency. We should know how our government is spending, especially our taxpayer money and government money. We should know that. We shouldn't have to, this shouldn't even be a thing, right? They should be transparent with us about that. And they have not been. And there are some things that have been revealed. So her demand was refund the American people because taxpayer money has been used inappropriately. Let's continue.
I would like to start with Social Security. By the time someone has worked and given all of our blood, sweat, and tears into our country to watch that money just be taken frivolously by people and by entities that we have that have no accounting, no accountability, I am asking that Social Security be increased by $50,000. The second thing that I ask is that every American taxpayer receives refunds from the federal government. These refunds are nowhere close to the $4.7 trillion that our U.S. Treasury is missing, or the $2.8 trillion that is missing from USAID. So I am asking that every American taxpayer, if they have worked between 1 up to 10 years, they receive $50,000. If they've worked from 10 up to 20 years, they receive another $50,000. If they have worked from 20 years up to 30 years, they receive another $50,000. From 30 years to 40 years, another $50,000. And from 40 years up to 50 years, another $50,000, for a total for anyone who's worked over 50 years in this country and contributed to our tax base. I'm asking our federal government to reimburse them up to $250,000, because
she came up with a whole plan. Like, she broke it down, the increments, etc. Now, here's something that I do agree with. I feel as though if there was taxpayer money that was used inappropriately or is unaccounted for, yeah, I think we should get that money back. I mean, I don't care who's president. If there's taxpayer money that was used inappropriately, I think we should get that money back. I don't understand why people are upset about this. The thing that drove me crazy about this is, like, again, the partisan politics. People are like, I can't believe that Donald Trump is saying that people should maybe get some money back. The hell is wrong with you? Shut up. Like, seriously, what is wrong with people? What's wrong with you? If they want to give people some of that taxpayer money back, I know a lot of people that could use that money right now, especially considering with this economy. But no, it's like, it's these kind of things. And I'll tell you the stuff that I don't agree with Doge as well. We're going to get to that as well. So don't think I agree with everything, because I don't. But I will say with this part, if you want to give people, hell yeah. Well, why would you say no? Let's continue.
We trusted our Congress. We trusted our presidents and our administrations to make sure that we were taken care of. But to hear that we have all of these agencies who have not been audited, who do not want to be audited, and who act like they are being infringed upon because we're asking them about money that our blood, sweat, and tears contributed to. I am asking President Trump, we have supported you. You have so many people out here. Your approval rating is tremendous. And I'm asking you, will you please give us some of our money back? Because when President Joe Biden said he was going to hire 87,000 new IRS agents to make sure all of us paid our money, and they also decided that anytime we put in $600 in our bank accounts, that we were going to be somehow flagged. But then our federal government right now has just misplaced $4.7 trillion. And that's just in the U.S. Treasury. And that's something that they just found. So we do not even know how much of our money has been wasted. So therefore, I ask on behalf of the entire American population that every American citizen, starting with $50,000 for anyone that's worked between 1 year and 10 years, that they receive refunds from the federal government.
So I'm not sure if Donald Trump saw this, but this video on X went viral before he made that announcement where he's like, maybe we should consider giving a stimulus. So I'm not sure if he saw that or maybe someone showed him that. But here is him talking about this here. I want to go ahead and bring this up, and then I'll get to the part about the Pentagon.
There's even under consideration a new concept where we give 20% of the Doge savings to American citizens and 20% goes to paying down debt, because the numbers are incredible, Elon. So many billions of dollars, billions, hundreds of billions, and we're thinking about giving 20% back to the American citizens and 20% down to pay back debt and pay down debt, which is, if you look at value, if it were a real estate balance sheet, the debt is tiny, but we still want to pay it down. Doesn't matter. We don't look at it as a piece of real estate. It's America. We're going to get it down through intelligence, hard work, and as Elon said, a word called caring. You have to care. By doing this, Americans will tell us where there's waste. They'll be reporting it themselves. They participate in the process of saving money.
Now, this is really important considering there was a new poll that was released that said Donald Trump is losing support on the issue of the economy. Just that issue alone, he is actually down. When it's polled about how Trump is doing with the economy, he's in the net, like it's down. And every poll is showing that, right? So Donald Trump is finding himself in a similar position that Joe Biden found himself in towards the end of his presidency, which is this economy. The prices are still high. That's a big one. But if they were to give everybody $5,000 stimulus check, I think that could turn things around possibly for Donald Trump. Now, again, I'll believe it when I see it. I don't see this happening yet, but if it did happen, why would you be upset about that? Like, that's the part I don't understand. Like with the Democrats, like they would be upset about him giving people that money up to $5,000. I would not be upset about that. And I think most people wouldn't. And some would probably say, oh, I can't believe this publicly, but privately, they would be happy to get it. There are a number of people that need that money for whether it's for bills or for unexpected expenses. Obviously, groceries, like prices are really high right now. And I want to remind you of something, because a lot of times people say, well, Joe Biden gave us those stimulus checks. Congress gave us those checks. I want to remind you what happened under Donald Trump's presidency when the original stimulus was announced as $600. People forget this. So we're going to go back. We're going back 4 years. Listen to this.
Now to the national coronavirus response, as millions are left waiting for President Trump to sign or veto the latest coronavirus relief package. As Andrew Dimbert reports, if it doesn't get signed into law by Tuesday, the federal government could face a shutdown.
The COVID relief bill now flown to Florida. Its fate will be determined by President Trump. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tweeting that the 5,000-plus page COVID-19 omnibus spending bill was sent to President Trump, where he's spending the holiday at his Mar-a-Lago resort. All the while, many families don't know if they will even have a home to go to after the holiday.
The fact that Congress has taken this long is an insult to the American people. It is an insult to small businesses. It's an insult to the working poor, and it's an insult to the unemployed.
After Congress negotiated for the better part of 8 months to get this deal done, it's President Trump's move now. Will he sign it, veto it, or do nothing, which would also effectively kill the bill and the hopes of millions of Americans desperate for the economic aid?
It really is a disgrace.
Trump voiced his opposition to the sweeping economic relief effort at the 11th hour after lawmakers finally agreed to terms, taking Capitol Hill by surprise. The president asking for those direct cash payments to most Americans be increased to $2,000.
Pause. Because, see, this is the part all of a sudden people have a little bit of amnesia. But I don't. This is the part that people forget. And someone needs to remind Jasmine Crockett of this as well, right? For all the talk on the interviews right now, where a lot of politicians are saying, well, Donald Trump didn't give you guys anything. Congress did that. He had to sign it, didn't he? So there's that. And then two, they originally proposed $600. Does everybody not, am I losing it? Does everybody not remember this? The original proposal was $600. And he was the one that said, increase it from $600 to $2,000. But for some reason, nobody remembers this. For some reason, everybody's like, no, it was just Congress. Like I said, he had to sign it. Didn't Joe Biden promise you $2,000? Did Joe Biden give you $2,000? No, he didn't. Remember what he said? Joe Biden said, well, I promised the $2,000 checks, but you already got 600. So wink. So I just wanted to remind you of that, where that came from. So it would not surprise me if we were to get some type of stimulus. What would be surprising if it was the $5,000? But so that's why I said I'll believe it when I see it. But here's Jasmine Crockett, perfect example. And she really changed, by the way. I remember when she was first running for Congress, this woman has completely changed. And she reminds me of the Black AOC. Completely changed. Listen to what she says about the $5,000. This is insane.
Now, President Trump says he likes the idea of giving some of the savings from Doge back to Americans as kind of a dividend. Would you support that?
Listen, he's just telling a lie. He's not the one that had anything to do with the $1,200 refunds that people had during the midst of COVID. That was done by a Democratic House and Democratic Senate. Right.
So does everybody see what she's doing, right? So the woman asked her about the $5,000 checks. She goes into the past and said he had nothing to do with it. He had to sign it, didn't he? When I got my stimulus check, whose name was on the check? It was Donald Trump's signature on the check. I just showed you the video where they were trying to push 600 and he said increase it to 2,000. And nobody is checking her on this. So apparently she don't want people to get $5,000. Again, look at this.
Now, President Trump says he likes the idea of giving some of the savings from Doge back to Americans as kind of a dividend. Would you support that?
Would you support it? That's the question. That's it. Listen, he's just telling a lie. He's not the one that had anything to do with the $1,200 refunds that people had during the midst of COVID. That was done by a Democratic House and Democratic Senate. Right now, what they're going to do is say, hey, we want to give you a refund, but Congress won't let us because they already know that there's just no money for that. The only reason that those refunds came before was because we were living in different times. This was a time in which hopefully we won't ever go through again. We had a once in a lifetime pandemic. The bad part is that I don't know if it's once in a lifetime because we know that Ebola, unfortunately, was.
And she goes into all that, okay, about that being spotted in New York. But here's the thing, folks. Okay, here's the problem, fam. The question was, would you approve of Americans getting some type of dividend from the waste that was discovered via Doge? Apparently, she don't approve of that. This is why Democrats lost. Like this is common sense. This is basic common sense. Apparently, she has a problem with that. I don't get it. Okay, Sabby doesn't get it. Don't understand that at all. So I agree with the Stimmy. Okay, if that happens, I 100% agree with that. I also agree with this. If this were to happen, this is a big one. The White House eyes 8% cut to defense budget to boost Trump priorities. I have told you guys on this show multiple times, I 100% approve of cutting the defense budget, cutting the Pentagon. The Pentagon has failed audit after audit after audit while they've been giving billions to Ukraine and to Israel. My whole thing is, again, you need to cut something somewhere. You start there. Now, remember, originally they said, I think we need to cut it by 50%. So that 50% is dropped to 8%. So keep that in mind. Now, what do I think is going to happen? And this is supposed to happen over the course of 5 years. My gut tells me that the type of cuts from the Pentagon that we would want to see, which is weapons, obviously, it's not going to be that. I think the cuts for the Pentagon are going to be staff. Right. So I think some of these generals that have been there for a long time might get laid off. I think they may make cuts that way, just like they've made cuts in other, federal jobs that way. People have been laid off. I don't think we're going to see cuts for weapons. And I think that's something people are expecting, but I don't think that's going to happen. And if I'm wrong, I'll come back and admit that I'm wrong. But 8% cuts, it's probably going to be staff. And I think it definitely should be higher than that. Now we're going to get to the parts where I have big disagreement. Okay. It's a no-no. Sabby does not agree with any type of cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, any of that. Right? So this is the big news right now with Doge. Trump blindsides staff, Congress with conflicting Medicaid messages. They are looking to make cuts there with Medicaid and also with Medicare. I 100% disagree with this. You cannot take people's Medicare and Medicaid from them, even if it's just small portions of it. You cannot do that. And I'm going to show you what they're doing with Medicare in just a second. What Donald Trump needs to remember is that there are a number of Trump supporters that are on Medicaid. There are a number of Trump supporters that are on Medicare. That shouldn't matter. But logistically, if you're thinking about where you're going to go where the party's going to go in the future, and if you're trying to have the Republican Party win again, logistically, that is a bad, bad, bad move, because they're not going to come out to support. Because the thing is, you got to remember, we're talking about people, 65 and up, right? They are also the ones that are more likely to come out and vote. So you got to remember that. I don't think there should be any cuts to Medicaid at all. And I don't know what he's thinking with that one. That's a bad idea. Bad, bad idea. I don't know if that's coming from Elon or it's coming from him. That's bad. And then here's another one with Medicare. And I want to tell you, I don't agree with this one either. They already made the announcement on Medicare.gov. I just want to show you guys this. Again, you do need to be aware of this. So starting April 1st, you must be in an office or a medical facility located in a rural area in the U.S. for most telehealth services. So this is where cuts are coming in right now. One that has been announced with Medicare is telehealth. If you aren't in a rural area, you can still get Medicare telehealth services on or after April 1st, including this part right here, monthly end-stage renal disease, visits for home dialysis, services for diagnosis, evaluation, treatment of symptoms, and acute stroke wherever you are, including a mobile stroke unit, services for the diagnosis, evaluation, or treatment of a mental or behavioral health disorder, including substance abuse disorder in your home. Now, here's the problem, folks, when we talk about telehealth and Medicare. Telehealth is very helpful for those who may not be able to physically leave their home. And if it's just a 15-minute appointment with your doctor, why do you need to go all the way into the office? So there's that. What I imagine they're probably trying to do is cut costs in this area because of the telehealth platform. So different, doctors, like offices and different like healthcare networks, they have a certain platform that they use for telehealth. I've used it before myself. Well, you had to pay for that. Like, that's not free. So they're paying for that in some way, shape, or form. So that's probably why they're trying to make cuts there. But I think this is a bad idea. I think that when you try to make cuts from Medicare and Medicaid, obviously, I honestly think this is the one thing that could make Trump supporters turn on him. You cannot inconvenience people with their health. We already don't have a universal healthcare system for everybody in this country. The last thing you need to do is complicate things even more. Don't forget that Luigi Mangioni's trial starts on Friday. I think there's been a very clear announcement here about how people feel about the healthcare system in this country. So that is a terrible idea. That needs to go. Don't make any cuts to Medicaid. Don't make any cuts to Medicare. Again, I said, I think that is the one thing that could make Trump supporters kind of turn on him. And then the other part I don't agree with is the jobs. I do not agree with people losing their jobs. There has been a little bit of misunderstanding about this job situation. I know a lot of people are saying, well, these are people who were last hired and it was probationary. That's not entirely true. That's some of the positions, but not all. In fact, I want to show you this one. Here's another one. As someone who comes from a military family, something that people may not be aware of are the people who are veterans that obviously may have like fought abroad or whatever, but they're military veterans who had federal jobs. So one of my high school classmates, she sent this to me, former high school classmates, and I said, holy shit, can I share this on my show? Now, this is a friend of hers, non-probationary, disabled veteran, illegally fired. This is what I want people to really understand. You have a lot of people, a lot of these soldiers that, they became veterans in the military. And once they become a military vet, they go on to get a federal job, right? So my dad had a federal job. Like, I'm very familiar with this. And some people may say, well, if he's disabled, how is he working? There are different levels of disability. And depending on your level, you're still allowed to work. Some people are not allowed to work at all, and some people are still allowed to work. So when these cuts happen, when people started losing their jobs, people didn't think about people like this guy, this gentleman here, who is a disabled veteran that had a federal job, who just lost his job. That's not okay. So when we tell the story, we want to make sure we're telling everything. Because I've seen a number of people, they're covering the story and they're saying like, oh yeah, they just got rid of those probationary people. It's no big deal. No, there were people who lost their jobs that were disabled. There were people who lost their jobs that were veterans. And if you say you care about the veterans as much as you claim you do, you would have a problem with this. I do not agree with people losing their jobs at all. So that Sabby don't like. And then when we talk about reducing waste and government spending and monitoring, it was really interesting to me that didn't seem to apply to Elon Musk and his government contracts. He didn't cut from himself. In fact, it wasn't until he was faced, tremendous criticism about Tesla, then all of a sudden there was a change. And that was because the State Department did it. The State Department removes Tesla name from planned 400 million contract amid Musk scrutiny. But that came from the State Department. It's not like he said, hey, we're going to start making these cuts here and save the government some money, and I'm going to remove my contracts as well to save the government some money. No, it was already announced that he was awarded a $400 million contract with the government. So Elon looks at this as though this is going to benefit him. I'm going to make cuts here in the government, but I'm going to see how I can shift things in my favor. This is exactly why I think someone like Elon Musk, he's a billionaire. He shouldn't even be in this position because it's a conflict of interest. You have government contracts. So there's that. And then there was this one. This is another one. Shout out to the lever here. That's not the only one. Musk just scored more government cash while pushing education cuts. We talked about the cuts to education. But when we talk about the contracts that he has, this is another one I want to mention as well. The new supplemental contract dated February 10th adds $7.5 million to SpaceX NASA work, according to Federal Procurement Data Systems records. So it says the overall transaction, $38 million to Musk company as part of its overall deal with NASA. So here was another one, SpaceX. So Elon Musk is making cuts. Yeah, let's make some cuts to Medicaid and Medicare, and let's lay off these people. But let me, go ahead and keep and grab that SpaceX contract. Let me get that 400 million government contract for Tesla. Do not agree with this. Conflict of interest. Elon, conflict of interest. So what you are seeing is Donald Trump could use this opportunity to really give back to the American people. But it seems like Elon Musk is using this in his own favor and trying to look out for himself and, of course, his billionaire buddies. And that's why I say there are some good things about it where I do agree with the government transparency 100%. I agree with cutting the Pentagon budget. I agree with giving people that stimulus check. I agree with that. I think that should happen. If taxpayer money was spent and is not accounted for, I agree you should give that money back to the people. But I don't agree with this other stuff. And that's where I stand on that. And that being said, again, who are the winners and who are the losers? Who's really winning here? I mean, right now, the winner, the big winner is Elon Musk. He's the big winner. And unless like this stimulus does happen and they back off of Medicaid and they back off of Medicare, I mean, these people have to get their job. These people have to get jobs. Like, and that's the other thing. If you're going to lay people off, there should have been another job ready for them that you're transitioning them to. I 100% agree that we should have a federal job guarantee. And we shouldn't be like firing people, like Jesus Christ. So that's my take on that. But the big winner here, folks, is Elon Musk. It's wild. Let's get that comment on Rumble. Thank you. Hey. Thank you, Skip. Remember, Politico is a USAID paid outfit. They have an agenda. I understand that, but I've seen this from multiple outlets, though. They've already talked about this, though. So just keep that in mind. Even here's the other thing that's crazy, too. Even Steve Bannon told Donald Trump this is a bad idea. Crazy stuff. All right, we'll go to the YouTube comments. Tia says, yeah, I am very much suspicious of this. The Oracle says, but there should be proper audits and public discourse before the huge cuts are implemented. That's a good point. Skylar the writer says, the hell is wrong with you? Literal LOL. I know, right? Thank you, Paul Green. She was preaching with a plan. I want my money and I need it now. Thank you. Where's the love? I needs my money. Cut the mofo check. Shout out to William Patrick, who just became a Sabby member. Give William a big whoop, whoop. Thank you, Yala. The Dems left YouTubers want AOC Crockett to lead. I'm sure they do. That's a surefire way to lose. Thank you for the Sabby membership, Angelina. She gifted one. Thank you. And thank you, Kevin. Medicaid/Medicare is your insurance. Just handing peeps money, risk an emergency that'll wipe your savings out. Thank you, Kevin. Give it up for the fam. All right. Okay. And we're moving on to the next story. Let's go ahead and smash the like. Thank you. If you're just joining, we will do call in tonight after the show. We have quite a bit to discuss. As you can see, should be an interesting time. The theme is winners and losers, folks. And I think we were all going to figure out who the loser is on this next one. Okay. All right. So Pod Save America bros. Yeah, they came from the Obama campaign, started a podcast and just started talking and, shit like that. And they are very much in this DC elite bubble. And ever since Kamala Harris has lost, they've been trying to, I guess, scratch their heads here about what went wrong and how do we beat Trump? And that's pretty much what this conversation here is about. Unfortunately, they decided to interview Stephen A. Smith about this question. How do they beat Donald Trump? What did they do wrong? And I know some people don't like Stephen A. Smith, and I know some people have told me that he's too loud or his voice is too loud or whatever. But I think in this particular instance, he's 100% correct. And I think he's kind of right to be loud. Listen to this, because Stephen A. Smith is really going to check Pod Save America.
And you're right. I mean, his message is burn it all down, and he somehow gets a pass for having been in charge for 4 years when all the problems he's complaining about now still existed. But Democrats were boring. We're the NBA skills competition where Wemby's cheating, while Trump is the USA-Canada hockey game where there's 3 fights in 10 seconds and you can't look away. And like, I don't know how to compete with that. We don't have a leader who can compete with that. We don't have a party that can compete with that. We don't have a message that can compete with that.
But tell why.
Pause. So here's the first problem. The Pod Save America admits publicly that the Democratic Party doesn't know how to compete with Donald Trump. And if you don't know how to compete with him, then you don't know how to beat him. And I said this before in 2020, the reason why Trump lost in 2020 was because of the pandemic. Had it not been for the pandemic, even everything that happened, I think Donald Trump would have won re-election. So here's the thing. You never admit that you don't know how to compete with your opponent. These are the types of things that you say behind closed doors. Like, you don't say this publicly because now you've let your opponent know that you don't know how to compete with them. I don't know. This is one of those things. And you can use this in sports as well. I mean, imagine if Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics said publicly, man, I don't know. It's just, we don't know how to compete with Kyrie. You don't say that publicly. You keep that to yourself. You never show your opponent that you're already defeated. And that's exactly what Pod Say Bro did. He says it out loud. We don't know. We don't know how to beat you. We don't know how to compete with you and da-da-da. Shh. These are things that you don't say in public. You never let them know that you don't know how to do it. But Stephen A. Smith breaks this down, and I thought he did a really good job with this. So listen here.
Hockey game where there's 3 fights in 10 seconds and you can't look away. And like, I don't know how to compete with that. We don't have a leader who can compete with that. We don't have a party that can compete with that. We don't have a message that can compete with that.
But tell why. You can't compete with that, and you don't have that. I'm not talking about you specifically, of course.
I know.
About Democratic Party. You don't know that, and you can't compete with that for the biggest reason of all. Because y'all are too busy trying to pick candidates for the American people instead of listening to the American people tell you who they want.
Oh, we will drop a beat on that. We will drop a beat. Dance with me. Dance with me. Do the rock face. Dance in your face. So that deserved a beat drop. That is 100% true. Stephen A. Smith here is calling out the Democratic Party for cheating.
The last Democrat that the American people told you they wanted was Barack Obama. Hillary Clinton, it's her turn. Bernie Sanders had momentum. It's Hillary's turn. Joe Biden captured momentum because Representative Clyburn got involved in South Carolina, saved his behind, but it's really, really his turn, okay? He has no business running for re-election, but everybody went for it, knowing he was supposed to be transitional. He's going to be 81 years of age. Then you sit up there. He doesn't have a primary. Then he goes on the debate stage, embarrasses himself. Then y'all still let him take 3 damn weeks to walk away instead of getting the hell out there immediately so you can see if there's somebody other than Kamala Harris who could be the Democratic nominee. Then she gets the nomination and everybody wants to act like she's the rock star all of y'all wanted all along. Oh, my God, let's throw up our hands and just say, hey, she is the one.
But Stephen A. did vote for Kamala Harris. Now, to the point here that he said about they're just picking people, right? So, yeah, a lot of people came out heavily and supported Barack Obama. I'll never forget that in 08. Never forget that. He still has the largest number of Black voter support since I've been an adult. Actually, since I've been alive, damn. But he still has that. Nobody's been able to match that. No other Democrat candidate has been able to match that. And Black voters have been leaving the Democratic Party since 2016 and on. They've continued to leave. So there's that. This point here that he says it was so-and-so's turn. It was so-and-so's turn. When he brings up the Bernie situation, he even points out that Jim Clyburn was the one that told everyone in South Carolina that we're going to support Joe Biden. Okay, great. But the problem is that for those of us who were paying attention during that time, Bernie Sanders was leading. Bernie Sanders had already won Nevada. He'd already won New Hampshire. And it wasn't even until later on that they admitted that he actually did win Iowa. They tried to push Buttigieg over the margin with that. And that was just ridiculous. Again, there's other ways to cheat. The way that it was going, Bernie Sanders was going to get the nomination. And so the Democratic Party, meaning the Democrat leadership like Obama and the Clintons, they decided to work behind the scenes and tell other politicians that were in that race that they needed to drop out to help Biden, not to help Bernie, to help Joe Biden. So yes, they do select people for us. But to that point, Stephen A., you're saying this and you're also calling out how Kamala was selected and she didn't go through a primary process, but you still voted for her. And that's why they continue to do it. Nobody is running away from what the Democratic Party is doing, not in mass. Because as long as they've been able to tell you since 2016, I have heard actually starting 2015, I have heard, but Trump. And all they have to do is say that to some people, and then you will just ignore the cheating. You'll ignore how they took delegates from Bernie Sanders and just gave states to Hillary Clinton that she didn't even win in 2016 because people were like, but Trump. So as long as people continue to do what the Democratic Party wants you to do, which is come out and vote for them anyway, and not push back on them heavily, and by pushing back on them heavily is by walking away from them altogether. En masse. Why would they change? Why would they do anything differently? Why? So there's those things.
You know good and damn well that wasn't the truth. Meanwhile, Trump has been around since 2015. They had Christie, they had Kasich, they had what is it, Fiorini? I believe her name is.
Yep. Carly Fiorina.
You had later on, you had DeSantis, you had Nikki Haley, you had Ramaswamy, you had all of these people. It didn't matter. We went through lawfare and all this stuff. It didn't matter. They looked the public in the face and they said, "We want him. We don't care what y'all want," and forced the Republican Party to capitulate to the demands of their constituency.
Which is exactly how it should be, right? So imagine if, because the establishment wanted Nikki Haley as the nominee, not Donald Trump. Imagine if, even after Donald Trump won all those states, imagine if the leadership of the GOP said, "Oh, we're going to give the nomination to Nikki Haley." Don't you think that Republican voters would have been pretty angry? Because a lot of Nikki Haley's votes came from independent voters, not registered Republican voters, by the way. Don't you think Republican voters would have been pissed? Okay. So why weren't Democrat voters pissed enough after that happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016? Here we go.
That's what they did. The Democrats somehow, some way have gotten away with ignoring the constituency and compelling the constituency to capitulate to what they want as a party. And that is the problem. And that's why I said it all needs to go. Some of those candidates need to go. The pundits, the strategists, they need to go. Whoever was involved with the latest election, from a strategy standpoint, every one of them should be fired. Every one of them.
We're cleaning house. I think Joe Biden running for re-election was a catastrophic mistake. We will not recover from it for a long time, and I completely agree with you there.
But Kamala Harris also running and not going through a primary was also a catastrophic mistake. And I know they don't want to say that. And that's another thing. It's not just about Joe Biden. Kamala Harris not going through a primary was a problem. And that needs to, I cannot say that enough. That needs to really, really be said. Listen to this part.
I want your thoughts on this. Donald Trump is using sports in a really smart way politically. I think he went to college football games and UFC fights during the campaign. He went to the Super Bowl. He did a loop around the track of the Daytona 500 in his limo over the weekend. It feels like he's creating a bond with these audiences that Democrats don't have. And how do you think Democrats can be a part of that conversation? I can't think of anyone who would go to a game, like, except for Barack Obama going to NBA games because he genuinely loved the sport. But like, who else?
This is why I'm a candidate. I don't want to be. And that's why I am one. Because you see, I wouldn't go to the Daytona 500, but I'd have been at the Super Bowl. I'd have been at the hockey All-Star game. I'd have been at NBA All-Star weekend. I'd be at the World Series. I'd be at All-Star weekend for baseball. I mean, the list goes. I'd be at a boxing match. I'd be at a UFC match, et cetera, et cetera. The point is, you're a politician. You're supposed to be able to do what the people want you to do as a politician. See, this is just, you're giving me damning evidence I didn't even think about. I didn't think about it until you brought it up. I'm going like this. Wait a minute. Aren't they politicians? Isn't it their job to recognize and notice what their constituency finds appealing and cater to that?
But let me tell you, if Obama went to the Super Bowl, Fox News would be like, how dare he? This cost $10 million. He puts.
Who cares? Who cares? This is another problem that the Democratic Party has. They worry too much about what other people think, and again, we can go back to sports. Because again, those of you who played sports, you know what I'm talking about. Like when you're really trying to win, you are not supposed to be focused on what the other team thinks about you. Now you can focus on their plays. You can watch their tapes. So you can see, like, if we're playing basketball, you can see like how their guard moves, how their forward moves. You can see if they're doing man-to-man coverage. You can watch and see if they're doing zone. You can watch their tapes. But you're not supposed to be sitting up there worried about what they're thinking about you. Who gives a damn? Who gives a damn? Why should Democrats care if Fox News would complain that Barack Obama went to, what do you care? Republicans don't vote for Obama anyway. The Democratic Party is too meek. They have become so, and again, the squad was supposed to push back on all of this. They were supposed to be that fireball going into the Democratic Party to change some things. They didn't get that done. What did happen, though, was that I guess the Republican Party kind of, looked over at what the squad was supposed to do and didn't get done. And we saw the Freedom Caucus in the Republican Party force a vote when the squad would not. So sometimes people learn from watching you what you did not do. And then they tried, to go forward and do it. But the Democratic Party, the Democrat politicians, they're just so concerned about what somebody else thinks about them. I don't want to go do this because I might get that opinion, right? Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders, and Democrats, even AOC was against that Joe Rogan gave the endorsement. Oh my God, what impression does it give? Who gives a fuck? And that's how I know you guys are spending too much time there with Goldman Sachs, too much time with the academics, that you're worried about how people see you and what they think about you instead of what the fuck you're supposed to get done. That's a big problem with the Democratic Party. So Stephen A. Smith has some things to say. And the Pod Save America dude, he shows it as well. He shows you. Even he thinks these things. Even he thinks, but then they would have said, da-da-da-da-da. The Democrats are always on the defense. And let me tell you, there's a time and place for everything. Sometimes you do need defense. But hell, you also need offense. And the Democratic Party doesn't play offense. If I know you don't play offense, I know how to beat you. If I know that you're scared to play offense, I know how to beat you. And you say it publicly. Just think about these things. Now, Brianna Joy Gray brought up a really good point here. She said, big open lane for anyone who wants to run on hating Democrats, billionaires, and U.S. imperialism. Who would have thunk? And she's posting this poll from when Bernie Sanders won. Now, again, Bernie has really, really sold out. He's out there like advocating for war right now. In 29 out of 30 polls at that time, Bernie beats Trump. It was very clear. It was very clear. But that's not what Dem leadership wanted. They didn't want that. So that's a perfect example when Stephen A. said, you guys picked a candidate instead of letting the people pick who they wanted. Perfect example. Then we get to this clown. His name is Eric Levitz, right? So he's another one of those Dem establishment flunkies. 2020 was an open primary in which most of the Democratic leadership and donor class spurned Joe Biden, only to see Democratic voters consistently prefer him in national polls and then deliver him a landslide victory in South Carolina, which led other mod candidates to consolidate behind him. So This is how you debunk this statement, right? I just showed you the polls that showed Bernie Sanders beating Donald Trump, 29 out of 30 polls. This is the same election. Now, Eric wants to overlook that and wants to focus on the fact that Joe Biden, in his opinion, was the right person to go with. That being said, though, he brings up South Carolina. And I got to use this. I have to say this is his talking point because people need to just throw this aside. When we talk about South Carolina is a red state. I lived in South Carolina. So Joe Biden winning the Democrat primary in South Carolina doesn't mean a damn thing because you can't win the state. And I saw corporate media and also like Eric is doing now, try to use this as a talking point. See, look how well he did in South Carolina. This is a sign. We need Joe Biden. Democrats don't win South Carolina. He didn't win New Hampshire. He didn't win Nevada. He didn't win Iowa. But he won in South Carolina. Yeah, after Jim Clyburn told people to vote for him. So stop using that talking point. That is a terrible talking point. South Carolina is a red state. It's just a mess. And then you'll see here, because people are angry. They're mad at Stephen A. Smith. And that one is James Carville, the same Jim Carville that told you that Kamala Harris was going to win. He's really mad at Stephen A. and he has some things to say. He doesn't like his appearance on Pod Save America. Here we go.
When it comes to sports, I find him to be really insightful. When it comes to politics, he don't know his ass from a hole in the ground. He's on that running his goddamn mouth about how he may have to run as a Democrat because there's nothing left of the Democratic Party. There's no talent. Stephen A., are you shitting me? I mean, you say you're friends with Wes Moore and you say you're friends with Josh Shapiro. Well, I'm friends with both of them. I think they're really extraordinary, talented people. I got news for you, dude. There's 6 or 7 other people in the Democratic Party that are just that talented. So before you start running your fucking mouth off about politics, a topic of which you really don't know anything about, you ought to sit back and think about it and call some people and run it by them. When it comes to sports, I find him to be really insightful. When it comes to politics, he don't know his ass from a hole in the ground. He's on that running his goddamn mouth about how he may have to run as a Democrat because there's nothing left of the Democratic Party. There's no talent. Stephen A., are you shitting me? I mean, you say you're friends with Wes Moore and you say you're friends with Josh Shapiro. Well, I'm friends with both of them. I think they're really extraordinary, talented people. I got news for you, dude. There's 6 or 7 other people in the Democratic Party that are just that talented.
If that's true, well, first of all, you heard what he said about Stephen A. Smith. I'm pretty sure that Stephen A. will probably respond to this. But first of all, if that's true, why didn't you guys have a primary? For all these talented people to debate each other. Why didn't you have a primary? Also, why do you guys keep naming people that take a lot of money from AIPAC? I told you guys about the black faces in high places. Wes Moore is another one. Don't be fooled. Why are you naming these people? And I think it's really interesting. And I said this before, like sports is Stephen A. Smith expertise. Politics is not. But he has said some things about the Democratic Party that is actually true. But speaking of expertise, James Carville here, he says that you don't know what you're talking about. It's not your expertise, da-da-da. But is it James Carville's expertise? Because James Carville told us that Kamala Harris was going to win. Didn't he tell you guys this when I told you she wasn't? So is it your expertise anymore? Also, every time you're on, the news, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. You ain't always got to have on an LSU hat or LSU shirt. I wonder how LSU feels about this. This guy's just cussing up a storm and da-da-da. And then it was a way he could have framed that without saying some of the things that he said. But honestly, at this point, James Carville, you don't know either. You're not no expert either. I don't even consider myself to be a damn expert, but you ain't an expert either. You've been getting it wrong. You come from the Bill Clinton era, which you said was the right way to go. And you said the Bernie Sanders populism was too far left and not the way for the Democratic Party to go. Then after Kamala lost, you said Bernie Sanders was right. So you don't know either. You all over the place. All over the place. Stephen A. Smith is correct. The Democratic Party doesn't have a solid bench. You guys just picking people that, oh, Westmore and da-da-da. And I can prove it to you. I can show you how bad the Democratic Party is doing right now. This is the new poll. Steve Kornacki. Job performance. Donald Trump, 45% approve, 49% disapprove. Congressional GOP, 40% approve, 52% disapprove. Congressional Dems, only 21% approve, 68% disapprove. Now, I don't think any of these numbers are great for either. I don't think these are great numbers for Trump. Better than he had before. I don't think these are great numbers for GOP Congress. I don't think these are great, and definitely not great numbers for congressional Dems. But the Democratic Party right now, congressional Dems, their approval rating is 21%. So I said, we tried to tell you what would happen if the Democratic Party didn't embrace a pro-worker, anti-war agenda. We tried to tell you that Dems were losing black voters, but these totals aren't great for either party in the duopoly. So what have I been telling you guys? What have we been telling them? It's why you have the numbers that you have. And then to make things even crazier, this is wild. Check this out. Justice Dems is trying to raise money again. Here they go again. Justice Democrats, now is the time to primary some spineless, self-serving corporate Democrats. Nominate someone you know who will actually fight for you to replace the representatives that keep failing you. First of all, under Biden administration, it was just over about a year and a half ago, you said you guys didn't have any money. You also announced under Biden's administration you weren't running any candidates under Justice Democrats. So now all of a sudden you got money? Where'd that money come from all of a sudden? People need to start asking that question. 2, does everybody see the game here with Justice Democrats and this whole squad fig? When Donald Trump is in office, that's when they want to fight. Because the fight isn't really against the establishment Democrats the way that Justice Democrats was explained to us by Kyle Kulinski and Cenk Uygur. The fight really was against Donald Trump. This is something that was explained a long time ago. Justice Democrats was formed as a response to Donald Trump. And the idea was that they would come in and have a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party had to be that bad for Donald Trump to actually win. But what you saw come of this was Justice Democrats and squad-like members just basically going into Congress, getting a career, just riding this all out, not fighting back against Democrat establishment, and totally mute for the most part during Biden's presidency. The ones who really spoke out, especially earlier on during the genocide, with the exception of Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, gone. Just like that. AOC had to be pushed into doing it. She had to be pushed into calling it a genocide, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then they still wanted to shame people for not supporting Kamala Harris. So now this same fucking project wants people to nominate more people to run through Justice Democrats. They out there asking for more money. When you click on the link, it sends you the money. Asking for more money again to repeat this process because now Trump's in office. None of this was happening under the Biden-Harris administration, and they were committing genocide. So what does that tell you, folks? They only want to fight when Trump's in office because they only really want to fight against Donald Trump. They don't really want to fight against these establishment Democrats. If they wanted to do that, they would have been doing that. That's the sell. That's the sell. And here's something else they need to pay close attention to. This poll that came out, Harry is back. Trump's broken the mold by remaking the electorate. Everybody needs to see this. Stephen A. Smith is correct.
What is going on here? Well, Donald Trump is doing his best Frank Sinatra interpretation or impersonation, going my way. Okay, Trump's net approval rating overall, look at this. He's at plus 3 points. He's been above water. He's been above water his entire second term, excuse me. Look among independents, though. He's way underwater. He's way underwater. He's at minus 10 points. Normally, you win independents. Therefore, you win the middle. But in fact, Trump is doing the exact opposite. He is winning overall but losing among independents. And this looks an awful bit like what happened in the fall election, where, of course, Kamala Harris won among independents, but Donald Trump won overall. Trump is repeating this playbook, breaking history, doing poorly with independents, but doing considerably better than he did in term number one, overall being above water.
Okay. So that means that Donald Trump is still performing well with his base. So even though he's down with independents, and to Harry's point, like he was going into the election, if you'll notice that he's up 3 points overall. And I'm gonna go ahead and say something. And again, some people don't like to hear this, but the reality is there are a number of people that I know that are happy about Donald Trump just on the immigration issue alone. Not everybody agrees with everything that he's doing, but some people agree with one or two things that he's doing, or the one thing that they were asking him to do. And that's where I think some of that support also comes in. So that's I'm trying to tell you guys, that's a real big one there. So you see what's happening. Down with independents, but he's still up 3 points overall.
So what is the reason for this, that he's posting basically overall he's up, but you're seeing this, and what's the reason?
This makes no sense, you might think, but what's going on here? Well, first off, what's going on here is, remember in term one, there was all that big opposition of Donald Trump. Democrats hated him. Well, right now, Trump's net approval rating among Democrats is underwater, way underwater at minus 78 points. But the Trump base is consolidated behind the Republican president to an extent that we really did not necessarily see in term number one. Look at this. His net approval rating is plus 84 points. So more Republicans are behind Donald Trump than Democrats are opposed to Donald Trump. And that is lifting him up and giving him that positive net approval rating, despite the fact that he's losing among Democrats and losing among independents, Sarah.
So do you guys see this? Plus 84 points with the GOP. Again, Biden didn't have those numbers, obviously, so again, the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do if they actually want to win. But then there's something that Tariq Nasheed pointed out, and I just want to show you guys this. I thought this was very interesting here. Today, there were nationwide protests against Trump, and notice what you don't see. You don't see any Black people protesting against Trump. Why do you think this is? Look at this.
You can see Washington, large crowds just across from the U.S. Capitol. New York City, protesters downtown in Union Square. Again, a sign that people are expressing themselves with their time, precious time off if they have the holiday, free time they might have gotten, a lunch break. Depends on the person, but this is one of the ways that you see civic engagement. Places like Michigan, a smaller town of St. Joseph, where we saw people gathering, again, smaller crowds for a smaller area, but gathering even amidst the cold, showing their signs to passersby, drivers, etc. Miami, San Francisco, we're also seeing this across the country today. Albany, Portland, a protester in Boston with a sign.
There's Boston right there. They're eating the checks. They're eating the balances. That's actually pretty clever. I ain't gonna lie. He has a Boston College hat, so he probably goes to BC. But this is a good point. Notice you don't see Black people out there protesting against Donald Trump. So what does that tell you? Hell, there were Black people protesting against Israel. There were Black people out there, all the different protests that I've covered. There were Black people out there protesting, for Gaza. There were Black people protesting to end the wars. When I went to the rally, the anti-war rally in DC, there were Black people out there protesting against the wars and stuff. I don't see any Black people out there protesting against Donald Trump. So what does that tell you? If you listen to MSNBC, CNN, they would have you believe that. I mean, if you're listening to Simone Sanders, if you're listening to Roland Martin, they would have you believe that all Black people are outraged. They out there in the streets. No, we're not. And yeah, some people may be upset, but are we upset enough to go out there and protest against it? Stephen A. Smith is right. But you can't tell this to the Dem fam, guys, the Dem fam. You can't tell them to them. So when we talk about winners and losers with this particular story, who's the winner and who's the loser. I mean, because right now, I would say that Stephen A. Smith is the winner. I would say that he's correct. And I think James Carville and Pod Save America, you guys are the ones that are the losers on this one. It's really interesting to me that many of us were saying this for years. Many of us have been saying since 2016 that you got to do something for the people. You can't continue to ignore Black voters. You got to do something for the Black community. You got to do something for, just like you do things for other parts of the community, other communities, you got to do things for the Black community. We've been saying this for years, but it took them hearing it from sports commentator Stephen A. Smith for it to really like click. They had to hear it from a celebrity. Things to think about, folks. Things to think about. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you. Thank you for the super sticker, Trash Panda. Thank you, Jasmine. I love seeing that Democrats reap what they sow. Being so controlling and chasing money left them with no control this time around. I wonder if they'll go broke next from lack of popularity. Jazzy J says the people favor populism right now, no matter the political leaning. Let's remember how Donald Trump mentioned in 2019, the only person who could have beat him was Bernie. Yeah, he did say that. Thank you, Courtney. But there were voters, mainly Black folks, mostly women, who I've argued with that said that they voted for Joe in hopes of something happening to him and that Kamala would become president. Oh my God, that's scary. I'm sorry to hear that, Courtney. Thank you. Sparky says, great work, Sabby. Thank you. Thanks, Courtney. The same James Carville who told Black male voters that Trump would round us up if he won. Same one. Thank you, Ebony, who's been a member for 3 months. Westmore has us in a huge deficit. He is being selected. His last state of the state was more of a campaign speech. We are very dissatisfied. Yeah, and I have family. My family's originally from Maryland. So I still have family members there. They're not too happy with him. Thank you, Jasmine. Black people are defending their neighbors from Nazis, Lincoln Heights in particular. Interesting. And thank you, Jay. Still can't believe Freaky Jenkins lost. Interesting, folks. All right, guys, we're moving on to our next story. Go ahead and smash the like. Thank you. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share just like a Care Bear. We're moving on to something a little bit different, and I don't think there's any dispute in who the winner is in this particular story. If you are not familiar with him, he is a rapper. He's also known as Rihanna's boo, His name is A$AP Rocky. Apparently, A$AP Rocky was in serious trouble, meaning he was facing 24 years in prison. Well, he received great news yesterday, and I want to go ahead and bring that up on the screen, and we'll get into these charges against A$AP Rocky. Listen to this, a joyful moment here during his trial.
The Los Angeles Superior Court, County of Los Angeles. People of the State of California versus Joaquin Mayers, case number BA 508142-01. We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Joaquin Mayers, not guilty of
Not against the audience.
I don't know if people saw, but he hugged. That was Rihanna that he hugged over there.
Hold down. Repeat again. We, the jury, above entitled action, find the defendant, Joaquin Mayers, not guilty of semi-automatic firearm in violation of Penal Code Section 245, Section B. A felony is charged in count 1 of the information this 18th day of February 2025, jury seat number 9, foreperson. All right, title, court, and cause. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Joaquin Mayers, not guilty of the crime of assault with firearm in violation of Penal Code Section 245, subsection B, a felony of charging count 2 of the information this 18th day of February 2025, juror seat number 94 person.
During this trial, I watched you periodically. You did what we asked of you at the very beginning, which is to give both sides a fair trial, pay attention, use your common sense, apply the law, and base your verdict on the evidence. I know you took extensive notes, and you took this as seriously as any jury could. We cannot have jury trials without folks like you. So you certainly have my gratitude. I want to extend to you my best wishes. Again, thank you. The admonition to not discuss the case no longer applies. You can talk about the case with anybody if you want to, or nobody if you don't want to. Alex has your certificates of completion. You can take your juror badges with you. Thank you again. You are excused.
All right. So that was ASAP. Rocky has been cleared on charges. He was found not guilty. I do want to get into the details of this case because these were serious charges against him. In case you are not familiar with the matter here, again, a joyful day there in the courtroom for ASAP Rocky, rapper, and again known as Rihanna's, boo thing. He was found not guilty in a shooting trial. Here's what to know about the case. I do want to go through a little bit of this for you guys here. He was charged with 2 felony counts of assault with a semi-automatic firearm filed after November 2021. The incident November 2021, in which a former friend said the rapper shot at him in Hollywood, grazing his knuckles. Let's just stop right there because this goes to show you how slow the justice system works. This incident took place in 2021. Here we are, 2025. You see, they're just now giving that verdict, right? So in that time span, Rihanna has had a baby, right? So think about all the other things that were happening along while he was awaiting this verdict. So there's that. Rocky, we go to this part here. Rocky had been free on bail since his 2022 arrest, but he faced immediate incarceration if he had been convicted. Rocky pleaded not guilty, rejected a plea deal that would have involved very little jail time, and opted not to testify during the case. This is risky, right? So a lot of times lawyers will try to get you to take a plea deal. And so a lot of these cases, you don't even get to see, right? So when people say, oh, well, when is this person going to trial? A lot of these incidents don't even end up happening in a courtroom because the lawyer is able to convince their client to take the plea. And they'll say something like this: just take the plea deal. You don't want to go to trial. You don't want to deal with all that. Just take the plea deal. That's the best offer you're probably going to get. So he actually took a big risk here, not taking that plea deal, going to trial, and then also choosing not to testify. A lot of times they get you to plea out, right? Let's go on a little bit more here. It says that he appeared nervous ahead of the verdict and leaped into the arms of Rihanna, his longtime partner, once it was clear the jury acquitted him. He said, "Thank y'all for saving my life." Now, here's a couple of things. What did the jurors decide? Ultimately, it took the jury of 7 women and 5 men roughly 3 hours to decide the case, finding Rocky not guilty of the 2 felonies. They could decide Rocky was not guilty because he only fired blanks from a prop gun taken from a music video set, as the defense argued, or that he acted in self-defense. Or they could simply decide the prosecution didn't prove its case and there was too much reasonable doubt to convict. So here's something interesting that's a part of that testimony here. ASAP Relly's testimony made up the bulk of the prosecution's case. That's his homie, right? That's his friend. One surveillance camera recorded the sound of the shots being fired. Another partially captured a scuffle shortly before the shooting. Yet another video showed the incident itself. Through the frame within view was small, blurry and far from definitive, right? So because they said there was that one video that did show the incident, but it was small and blurry, the jury really couldn't say that they knew without the shadow of a doubt that the person in the video was A$AP Rocky, right? So there's that part. And then the other piece here, it says that jurors also considered text messages to Rocky and others that Relly sent before and after the incident. Relly also filed a lawsuit and said in the communications that he had a greater desire to be paid than to see Rocky prosecuted. Rocky's lawyer called him an angry, pathological liar who committed perjury again and again and again and again. Defense witnesses included 2 members of Rocky's inner circle who testified he carried a prop gun. Now, I just want to bring up another case that I discussed before on this show about a year or so ago, and that was the trial of, the Rust cast with Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin, without the shadow of a doubt, killed someone on that set. Now, obviously not intentionally, but there was a mixture in the rounds where some of the rounds were blanks and were like for the prop gun, and some of them actually had live ammunition. And unfortunately, when Alec Baldwin fired his gun, there was live rounds in there within that mix, and he shot and he killed a young woman on the set. Again, not intentionally. But at that time, what the DA was arguing is that, well, technically you were still responsible because as the producer of the film, it is your responsibility to check and make sure that all the ammunition is, prop ammunition, that they're blanks, that they're not live rounds. This trial went back and forth for a while because I remember at first they acquitted them and then they came back and said they got more information, etc. Either way, the point I want to bring you is this. Even during that case, Alec Baldwin wasn't facing 24 years. But this incident here with A$AP Rocky, where they were accusing him of shooting his friend, which they said grazed like his knuckles, he was facing 24 years. So no, there's no real justice in the justice system. And I said this before back then about Alec Baldwin with manslaughter. I said, remember again, that it doesn't mean that you intended to kill that person. But what it does show is that the actions or the recklessness that you caused, that actually contributed to the death of said person. So people have to understand the difference there. So no, there's no justice in the justice system. The penalty Rocky faced if convicted, Rocky faced up to 24 years in prison. A conviction would have likely had immediate consequences, especially if he was taken into immediate custody. In addition to his life with Rihanna and their 2 young children, Rocky has a packed public schedule for the next few months. So what happens after his acquittal? He's got 3 big events coming up. He'll be headlining Rolling Loud Music Festival in LA. I think he's supposed to go to the Met Gala at some point, hang out with LeBron and Pharrell and all this jazz. And it also says he has a motion picture in the works as well. The Rihanna part here, before the trial started, whether Rihanna would appear was one of the biggest unanswered questions. And so the judge, they did ask his lawyer if she was going to show, and they said she's welcome to be here whenever she wants. I'd just like to know. So just wanted a heads up. But yeah, she was there in the courtroom. It says she was a frequent observer in that courtroom. And so she was there for people who are wondering what happened. This relationship here between A$AP Rocky and A$AP Relly, it says that the trial had its roots in high school in New York when the Harlem raised Rakim Mayers, that's A$AP Rocky, and Terrell Efron, known as A$AP Relly, who was the trial's most important witness. So these two, they go way back. It says a feud developed after Rocky achieved widespread fame and came to a head in Hollywood that night, November 6, 2021, when Efron said that Rocky fired at him 3 or 4 times, the shots grazing his knuckles. So again, like I said, he was facing 24 years for a shot that grazed someone's knuckles, and Alec Baldwin was not facing 24 years for actually killing someone. So yeah, there's no justice in the justice system, but it is definitely, I think, clear to say here that ASAP Rocky is the winner in this situation, right? He's not a loser. He won. So now he doesn't have to worry about this anymore. And honestly, like, check your friends, man. You gotta be careful. You gotta be careful, especially as you start to blow up, and ASAP Rocky did blow up. As you start to blow up, you gotta kind of check your friends and some of the people around you, because people try to do anything. And there is jealousy. And it sounded like Relly had some jealousy towards ASAP Rocky. And I don't know, people will switch up on you. Okay. I'll be the first to let you know. So, but a big win for ASAP Rocky. Big win. All right, let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Ta Seti. Why are we falling for the narrative that returning stolen goods or at best mismanaged funds to taxpayers is a stimulus check? That's what it's described as, or dividends, but I get where you're coming from. Thank you, Dolan. Says Sabby Abby always doing the damn thing. GN. Thank you. FM says Alec Baldwin deleted. Yep, there you go. Deleted somebody. He didn't have to go through all of this. Baldwin is chilling at home. And thank you for the super sticker Love Work Project. Thank you so much. We have one more story for you, and then we will dive into call in tonight. This one is pretty funny. At least I think it's kind of funny. I think they did a really good job here. So we'll go ahead and get into that. Smash the like button. Thank you. And we're moving on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this war in Ukraine really has people in their feelings, especially that, you know, Trump is trolling Zelensky right now, calling him names, and is trying to find a way to end the war in Ukraine, which is what polls are showing. The majority of Americans are not looking at the Ukraine war in a favorable way anymore when you compare it to 2022. So when you see these conversations, just keep that in mind, that there are still some people who are still trying to find a reason to keep this war going. And Glenn Greenwald had to debate someone who was trying to do that. And that's Dan Crenshaw. Dan Crenshaw, he's the gentleman with the eye patch, very much feels that the U.S. government should not abandon Ukraine. Let's get into this conversation here. I thought this was really interesting. A panel here on Piers Morgan's show, and I think Glenn did a good job. There's one thing I want to add that Glenn didn't mention that I will add to this. Listen.
The panel now. Glenn Greenwald, great to have you back on Uncensored. What do you make of this? I mean, Trump, at the very least, what he's done is immediately reestablish diplomatic ties with Russia. Do you think that's a good move?
I actually do think it's good for the two countries with the world's largest nuclear stockpiles that have come close to nuclear Armageddon in the past to actually speak to one another. I think one of the worst parts of the last decade in Washington, the Russiagate hoax and all of that, was that it created a climate where it was almost criminal for American officials to speak to Russians. Even during the Cold War, when we viewed each other as existential threats, we had all sorts of open communication. The Russians would come to the United States. We would hear from their leaders. Our leaders would go over there and speak. Of course, these kinds of communications are vital. Trump deserves a lot of credit for opening that up. It's dangerous to the world when the Russians and the Americans don't speak. And I think we have to begin with, since we all love democracy here so much, we're all so eager to advance it around the world in between arming and propping up the Saudis and Egyptians. But in general, we're good people. We love democracy. We just had an election in 2024 in which the winning candidate, Donald Trump, went around saying, not as an ancillary view, but as central to his campaign, It's time that we keep American money in the United States for American citizens. We have to stop funding all of these foreign wars where our country's not at risk, and specifically said he wants to end the war in Ukraine. The Biden-Kamala Harris view, the view of the Democratic Party, was no, we can't talk to the Russians. We have to fund Ukraine until the very last Ukrainian is dead in order to expel all Russian troops from Ukrainian soil. A complete pipe dream from the start. And Americans voted for the candidate who said he wanted to end U.S. involvement in the war. That should matter if we love democracy so much. Americans, and I think that's what Trump, above everything, whether you disagree with him or agree with him, and I have both, is following through on what he promised he would do in the campaign. And that kind of responsiveness democratically in the United States is very rare to see.
Yeah, I mean,
and there are a number of people, again, who did support Donald Trump because of that reason, right? So there's different reasons why people supported him. And that is one of the reasons why some people did choose to do that. They were like, no, he said he's going to end the Ukraine war. We don't need to send any more money or weapons to Ukraine. That was a big one for some people. So that's a really good one there that Glenn brought up. So that whole America first, ideology and rhetoric that was a part of Donald Trump's campaign. But watch this. This is interesting.
Okay, I posted on X yesterday. Let me get this straight. Are the world's liberals now enraged that a Republican president wants to stop 2 wars? And I don't think I've had a post that's blown up quite like that in a long time. Millions and millions of people interacting with it. Because it is a weird situation where historically, in the last 50, 60 years, the liberal positions have been, can Republican presidents please stop going to war everywhere? Now you've got a Republican president who openly hates war, wants to stop it wherever it starts. And all right, people may not like his tactics at the moment, but he is a negotiator. He often uses blunt, shocking tactics to negotiate. And he's bringing that tool, that skill set to both Ukraine and Israel. But let's talk about Ukraine for the purposes of this. What's your view of it? I mean, are you instinctively, this is an outrage, or do you think it's quite good that a Republican president wants to have peace, not war? Piers Morgan.
Yeah. So then we want to move on to let's go to the Dan Crenshaw part. This guy is really cringe. I see him prop up every now and then. Watch this.
Well, absolutely.
That's what Trump said. I mean, Trump was asked categorically. He clarified it. He said, to be clear, when it comes to the actual negotiations over resolving the war, of course, Ukraine will be at the table. What they've had in Saudi is the first time that the Russians and the Americans have got together, and actually Ukraine was one of many things that they talked about. So, we
talk to Ukraine every single day. We have people there with them every single day.
I just think we should save our fury about whether Ukraine get included or not for when they actually get excluded.
Can I just insert a little bit of realism into the conversation?
Yes.
Because I know Dan started off by saying, "Oh, Russia's this crappy little second-rate power. We have to flatter them and make them think they matter, but they really don't. They're really weak." It's always a pretty weird contradiction to simultaneously say that and then at the same time warn that Russia's going to start invading Western Europe, this crappy little second-rate power. But the reality is, this is the reality whether you like it or not, Russia has fought a war now for 3 years against unified NATO and the United States, pouring hundreds of billions of dollars and highly sophisticated weapons into Ukraine, and the front line continues to move westward, not eastward, where the Russians are gaining more and more territory. More and more Ukrainians are being killed. There are fewer Ukrainian men left in that country who want to fight. They're being forcibly dragged in there and used as cannon fodder, or they're fleeing and risking their lives to do it. The reality is Russia is winning the war or has won the war. And you can say, oh, you must be a Kremlin agent to say that.
You just got to know nothing about military information or tactics.
So here comes Dan Crenshaw, who's like, this guy doesn't know anything. You weren't in the military. I was a part of the military. I know what I'm talking about. But it's obvious to anyone who's been following this war for actually since the beginning. It's very obvious. Ukraine has no chance here. Yes, Russia is winning this war. And I think anyone has common sense about the situation can see that very well. There's also the issue of Ukraine running out of soldiers. And you guys have seen these videos where they're pulling people off of the street to get them to go fight. This is absolutely horrendous and insane. And Dan Crenshaw was just like, oh, no, Russia is losing. Are you kidding me? as big as Russia is, have you guys seen Russia? And then you look at Russia and look at Ukraine and think about all the weapons and the power that Russia has. The US government has been giving weapons to Ukraine constantly. And even with all of those weapons, they still can't beat Russia. And the US government and NATO, they knew this. The US government and NATO knew that Ukraine cannot beat Russia. This whole idea is really to create a bigger conflict, to drag us into a World War III. Anything to push Russia out, to stop Russia from having the type of prominence that they have. And after Russia, it would be China, in my prediction. After Russia, they would go after China next. And so they're willing to put all these people at risk for something that they know is not possible. They know they can't win, you know? It's just one of those things.
That's what you have to do to say that. You just have to know nothing.
So the idea that
is clearly what you do.
Yeah, well,
I mean, you got so many facts wrong. It's hard to know where to even start.
You can. You want it? You think Ukraine is winning the war? In which direction is the front line moved, Dan? Has it moved westward or eastward?
It depends on where you're looking at. It depends on where you're looking at. I hate to break it to you, but it depends on where you're looking at. And the ratios of Russian deaths to Ukrainian deaths is like 4-1. You just don't know what you're talking about.
Tens of thousands
You've never fought
of Ukrainian
anything.
men. You have
don't
no
know
idea
anything
what you're
about the
talking
military.
about. I fought a lot of things. I fought a lot of things.
Oh, you fought a lot of things?
Just because you were in the military doesn't make
things.
you an expert. I'm sorry to say that Donald
I don't need
Trump
to be an
just ran
expert. I just know basic facts and I have all the briefings on it. I don't think you do.
Clearly Russia is winning the war. The Ukrainians don't even want to go and fight this war any longer. They're fleeing the country.
It's a war of attrition with a stalemate. That's what we're looking at right now. That's the most honest way to look at it.
I'm sorry to say, one of the things that I know that you don't actually have to go join the military to understand is that Russia is many, many, many times larger than Ukraine. And that's the reason why the most prescient geopolitical experts, people have been on this show, I've interviewed them many times, people like John Mearsheimer and Jeffrey Sachs and Stephen Wald, all said since 2022, Ukraine will inevitably lose this war and Russia will win it. And I'll tell you why. This is the one point I want to make. When President Obama was on his way out of office in 2016, Jeffrey Goldberg interviewed him for a cover story on the Obama foreign policy doctrine. And he criticized Obama for not standing up to Russia in Syria and in Ukraine. And what Obama said was, the reality is Ukraine is and always has been and always will be a vital interest to Russia because it's right on the other side of their border, and it has never been and never will be a vital interest to the United States. So the idea that we're going to confront Russia or go to war with Russia over who governs various provinces in eastern Ukraine is absolute madness.
All right,
and President Obama was absolutely right, and President Trump thinks that too.
All right, yes.
So let's jump into this part here, right? Because Mr. The Crenshaw dude, right over here, Glenn is getting very upset. Glenn is getting very upset. And so again, obviously Dan Crenshaw, he's a warmonger. Like I said, he wants this war to continue. Some people call him Eye Patch McCain. Like you get the idea. So that's what he wants to happen. Glenn, on the other hand, is thinking about this from a logical perspective. You're not going to beat Russia. So what are we doing? How many people in Ukraine have to die? People say they care about the Ukrainians. How many people in Ukraine have to die? How many? They're pulling people off the street that are in their 40s. So to me, it's a lose-lose situation. But they want to keep it going. Now, the question is, why do they want to keep it going? It's not just to stop Russia, right? It's not just to stage a larger war. You have to get into that question as well. Why do they want a larger war? All of this is good for the military industrial complex. All of this is good for Raytheon. It's great for Northrop Grumman. Like that's what this all goes back to. You have to connect the dots. When people make this comment, they used to say this, that war was good for the economy. No, war is good for the military industrial complex. It's good for those contractors. It's great business for them. So that's really what they're keeping in power here. That's really what they're keeping going. They don't care if people die in Ukraine, just like they didn't care when people died in Vietnam.
Quickly, so two things.
It's not worth dealing with.
Yeah, two things real quick. Going back to the conversation you and Dan were having, I will say this. Right now, Ukrainians, Zelensky and Europe feel like they're left out. That's number one. That's how they feel. What's happening right now with Russia and US. Secondly, I'm not going to be a cheerleader here for Russia and say they're winning a war. Ukrainians, having talked to them, having talked to the people who are resisting, I will tell you this. I will tell the world right now. Ukrainians, to the last man, to the last elder, to the last kid, to the last woman, will fight. They will fight to the end for their independence.
Well, actually, as you said that,
No, I'm sorry. There are people, they're dragging people off the street and the people are trying not to go. They're dragging people off the street and pulling them into a van and the people don't want to go. And they're saying, no, let me go. What are you talking about? Now, this guy here who's speaking, he's very good on Gaza, terrible on this one. And you'll find that with some people. Some people, they're really good on Israel and Gaza. But when you start talking about China, awful. When they start talking about Russia, awful. Great on Gaza, though, but they can't apply those same type of concepts when it comes to other countries. But no, I have not seen that at all. I'm not seeing these people say that they want to go out and fight and all this stuff. These people are begging you not to drag them and pull them into a van and take them away from their family.
Being dragged there. They're being dragged there involuntarily.
Well, hang on. Hang on, guys. Let me just read. I want to read you some breaking news.
He's sprinkling in, Glenn is sprinkling in some truth about the nature of the war with some facts that are just incorrect. And so
all right, I'm going to bring you
lying to.
I'm going to bring Dan in, and then I'll let others respond. Let me just read what the Ukraine foreign minister just said. The Ukrainian people and their President Zelensky refuse to give in to Putin's pressure. Nobody can force Ukraine to give up. We will defend our right to exist. Dan.
That's from the foreign minister. Do you guys really believe the foreign minister went around and asked every Ukrainian if they want to continue doing this? I highly doubt it. It's just like when Joe Biden made a statement and said that the U.S. will always continue to support Israel unequivocally. What did I tell you back then? I said, what do you mean? I never said that. A lot of you didn't say that, but Joe Biden made the statement and said basically like he was saying it for all Americans. So think about that as well with the foreign minister. So this is like Pierce knows better than that.
Yeah, that seems like pretty consistent with what they've been saying. Look, I mean, I'll agree with Glenn on one thing. Look, if you without Western support, yes, Russia would eventually beat Ukraine. Now, I think people forget the geopolitical strategies of this. For America, even for Europeans, this isn't so much about Ukraine. It's about Russia. And yes, I'd hate to break it to you, but it's not a contradiction to say that they are a second-rate power, but they would also invade Baltic states. That has long been part of Putin's grander plan for greater Russia. And they can do it if Europe and the United States lets them. Yes, they can do it to a small state if they let them.
Don't you guys think if Russia wanted to take over, because they always go with Poland, if Russia wanted to invade Poland and take over Poland, don't you think they would have done that by now? Always question what is presented in front of you. As powerful as Russia is, don't you think they would have already done that? We're supposed to sit here and pretend that 2014 didn't happen. We're supposed to pretend that NATO didn't push this. Let's go back and check some things seriously, because the reality is we wouldn't even be in this situation right now if it wasn't for NATO going against the agreement that was made after the fall of the Berlin Wall, which is that they would not push, NATO would not expand towards Russia. NATO decides to expand towards Russia anyway, going against the agreement. Russia didn't go against that agreement. NATO did, and the U.S. government went right along with it. So they're in on that together. There's one more part here. I'm going to let this part play, and then we got to get to the difference between Gaza and...
This is kind of how World War II happened, if I may remind everyone. There is a domino effect here. And there is grander purpose by Putin, and he said you just have to listen to what he says. You don't have to take my word for it, to expand their sphere. They can say that they feel under threat by NATO. They're full of crap. We know for a fact they've never felt threatened by NATO, only to the extent that they don't like NATO because it means they can't conquer other countries and take their stuff. Now, here's the biggest important part about geostrategic implications for the United States.
That part's hilarious, considering the U.S. government conquers other countries and controls their stuff.
This is why it's about Russia, not Ukraine. When you allow dictators to just conquer other countries and take their stuff, you have reverted us to a pre-World War II history. That's problematic. That was a time in history, and it lasted for thousands of years, when we didn't have a global economy. Life sucked. There was tens of millions dead in wars because it was normalized for dictators to invade others if they wanted to take their stuff. And for the last 80 years, America has led an order where we don't allow that. That's actually...
Right, because we do it. Because America does it. Because America is the one that invades all these countries and takes their stuff. Let's fast forward here to the part about the difference between this situation of Gaza and Ukraine. This part right about here. You guys need to hear this part, because this is where I think this is the part where I think they try to trip up Glenn.
The Ukrainians have the right to fight all they want. The question is whether or not the United States is duty bound and whether American workers are duty bound.
Hold on. I'm just making sure I'm getting. Okay, I was just making sure I'm at the right spot. Sorry about that, guys. Right about there.
Probably because I'm a Kremlin agent. Probably because I'm a paid agent of the Kremlin, which is what you're implying. The reason I think the Ukrainians have the right to fight for as long. The reason the Ukrainians have the right to fight all they want. The question is whether or not the United States is duty bound and whether American workers are duty bound to finance that war. And Americans made very clear in this last election,
but Glenn, just to jump in
as well, that they don't want to.
Just to jump in, Glenn, on that point though about your apparent inconsistency, what is the difference in your head between the situation in Gaza and the situation in Ukraine?
This is a trick. This is a trick, right? So I'm going to let Glenn answer this. And then there's a portion to this that I want to answer, because I've seen people do what Pierce just did. Watch this.
I think the Palestinians have the right to resist the occupation. I think the Ukrainians have the right to fight the Russians as well. I don't have any inconsistencies at all. I'm not advocating that the United States arm the people of Gaza to fight against the Israeli occupation, just like I'm not advocating that the United States arm the people of Ukraine.
So should Israel be allowed to keep land in Gaza then?
No, but they're going to, because it's the reality. Even though I don't like it, it's the reality that the Israelis are
my point is, what is the difference? If you think that they should not be allowed to keep land in Gaza, having attacked it, but you think that Russia, I'm not to put words in your mouth, but do you think that Russia should be allowed to keep the land they've taken to go with the land they took in Crimea? I mean, do you think they should be allowed to?
No, I don't think it's right. But I recognize the reality that the Israeli Jews are not going anywhere. They're going to stay in Israel. They're going to end up annexing the West Bank. Miriam Adelson paid for that to make sure. And they're going to continue to do whatever they want in Gaza and Syria and Lebanon, occupying the parts of those countries they're occupying. That's just the reality, even though I don't think they should. The reality is that Russia is a much stronger country than Ukraine and is going to end up protecting the ethnic Russian population in Crimea and eastern Ukraine, whether we like it or not. And this is something the U.S. government has known for many years. As I just referenced, that Bill Burns memo and a lot of other documents that ended up emerging showed that the U.S. government knew that.
The problem with Glenn, it's not so much that he's inconsistent. I think he fundamentally disagrees or doesn't understand what I laid out about the geopolitics of the last 80 years. That's one problem. Second.
Okay, we got enough of Dan. So I want to add this part. One part I wish Glenn would have added to this, because see, this is a trick question, and I've seen Pierce do this before, which is the fact that they try to say, well, if you support, the Palestinians' right to resist, then why don't you support the Ukrainian people's right to resist? So a couple of things. What Glenn is advocating for is that the U.S. government should have nothing to do with it, that the U.S. government should not fund Ukraine, and the U.S. government shouldn't fund Israel in these conflicts either. So he is being consistent with that. However, the point that I would have added to this is that you do have to remember that Ukraine was ethnically cleansing Russian Ukrainians. See, this is the part that, again, like Pierce and people, they want to leave this out. If you were to listen to corporate media, and especially anyone who's, wants you to see Russia as just an enemy and only an enemy, right? And this is not to say that Russia is perfect, because they're not. There's no such thing as a perfect country. They leave that part out because they want you to believe that this all started on, when Russia invaded Ukraine. Didn't you hear that similar rhetoric again? This all started on October 7th, and they totally bypassed everything that happened before that. They bypassed the Minsk Accords. They bypassed the 2014 coup with NATO. They bypassed that. They bypassed what I just told you about Ukraine that was ethnically cleansing Russian Ukrainians. Don't forget, they were committing war crimes against the children as well. all this is left out of the context. And so they just drive you with that day that they say Russia invaded. And so this is all Russia's fault. It is very important that you understand that context. And I had to obviously do a lot of research about this, but I've spoken to so many different people about Russia and Ukraine. And they've come onto this show, as you guys have seen, and they all give a little bit more information than what you're hearing on corporate media. And Scott Ritter, for example, goes through the whole history of it, right? So there's a reason why a lot of people sat down to watch that interview with Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin, because people wanted to hear the other side. And if you are watching corporate media, particularly here in the West, you're only hearing one side. All of these commentators and these so-called reporters, they're interviewing Zelensky. They're not interviewing Vladimir Putin. Do you think that's fair that people only get one side of the story with the war? You see the same thing with Israel and Gaza. All of these reporters that sat down to interview Benjamin Netanyahu or his advisors or IDF soldiers, you didn't see them sitting down and interviewing Hamas or people in Gaza at that point in time. No, CNN just all of a sudden suddenly cares about the Palestinian people after Donald Trump won. Now they want to know how Palestinian Americans feel. They didn't care about how they felt before. The media is the gatekeeper. It is the gatekeeper of information, is the gatekeeper of the source of information. The media, corporate media, will have you so propagandized, especially if you're watching Western media. And most people don't have time to look up more information. And I'll give you an example, because Glenn tweeted this, right? So he showed receipts. Obviously, you can't do this when you're on Piers Morgan's show, but he said, I was on Piers Morgan's show earlier debating Ukraine when I said Ukraine's front line was crumbling and Russia was advancing westward. Dan Crenshaw said I made that up, which is odd since that's the consensus of even the most fanatically pro-Ukraine Western media. And he has receipts. Amid talk of ceasefire, Ukraine's front line is crumbling. Here's another one. Russian advances in Ukraine grew 7-fold in 2024. Data shows. Here's another one. Ukraine front could collapse as Russia gains accelerate. Experts warn. Another one. Their human resources are unlimited. Russia's advances signal bleak spring for Ukrainians. So what Glenn said was true. And obviously, when you're on Piers Morgan's show, you can't bring up these receipts the way that you can on your own show, right? But he was correct. And Dan Crenshaw was lying. But I think what Piers Morgan tries to do there, especially towards the part of the conversation when he's like, well, would you feel that you feel one way about Gaza? Why don't you feel this way about Ukraine? That type of thing. It reminds me back when Piers Morgan was asking people, but do you condemn Hamas? It is to get you to shift gears and shift focus, right? It's a trick. And that's what I call it. It's a trick. And I think even though there was that trick, I think what Glenn was trying to say is that the U.S. should not be involved in either one of those conflicts. But the way that you hit back at that question, you also got to remember to tell people that NATO was not supposed to expand towards Russia after the fall of the Berlin Wall. That was the agreement. You have to remind people about the coup in 2014, about the Minsk Accords. And you also have to remind people that Ukraine, they were ethnically cleansing Russian Ukrainians. That is important to bring up. Again, when people are in these heated discussions, I think a lot of times you're may not remember everything off the top of your head like that. But yes, thank you, Rogent, a red herring. Yeah, they throw you this bone to try to have a gotcha a moment, right? And so we just have to make sure that it's not the same. People have to understand Gaza and Ukraine is not the same thing. So, but I do think in the end, that's an interesting conversation. You guys got to watch the full debate. But I do think in the end, I think Glenn was the winner because that Dan Crenshaw dude is crazy. And obviously, as you can see with the data, He was wrong and Glenn was right. All right. We are going to do call in tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be back and I'll set up that call in room. So,
do you hear that Crenshaw dude actually said domino effect?
Yeah.
Is it 1960?
That guy is so weird. All right. I'll be back in a sec.
All right. This is the part of the show where myself, Eric T. Red, comes from the background to the foreground for a short time while we give our Sabrina a little break before we transition over to the Zoom Hangout that we like to call Call-In. It used to be on Call-In app. The Call-In app went bye-bye, so now we do it on Zoom, which in some ways it's better, some ways it's worse, but it works. And Sabrina's actually going to be setting up the room now, and then we'll give you the link. We'll also set up the sabbysabs2.com to make it easy to get in there. Corey's actually going to be in the background setting up that one too. And but yeah, this was quite an interview there, and thank goodness, like Sabrina is game for watching all this stuff, so we don't have to, because I think we saw more than enough of that one. But yeah, Glenn was definitely winning that one and really hitting some good points. And there's this aspect of it of like, why should the U.S. be even be involved? And I think a key thing with that is to really focus on the money. And it is a place that there is a common driving factor. Excuse me, a common driving factor, whether you're looking at Israel, Gaza, or whether you're looking at Ukraine, Russia. In that, the more that these wars continue, the richer and richer the military-industrial complex, the defense contractors, and their owners, the billionaires, the richer and richer they get. And I would submit that is the driving force between both of these conflicts. It's all about the money. Every bomb dropped on Gaza that Israel uses, every weapon systems, these things like this the Iron Dome, which has been called like the tissue paper dome. The thing barely even works. But what the Iron Dome works really well at is enriching the MIC and the billionaires with Russia, Ukraine. I mean, the amount of arms sales and money that has gone into that is really hard to even wrap your head around. And so when people say, one thing that does bother me a bit is when people say, why are we giving all this money to Israel? Why are we giving all this money to Ukraine and Zelensky? And, Israel and Ukraine and Zelensky get a taste of it. But what's really happening is this is huge, huge money going to the arms dealers. I remember when arms dealers used to be considered bad guys, but I think it's really important to understand that part of it. It's about the money first and foremost. These MIC, military industrial complex, and arms dealer interests are part of that billionaire class that at this point owns and controls our government, and owns the media. And the only real path to fixing up this mess is to transform our government, is to basically turn it into a government that really represents us. That means cutting the puppet strings, which is the money that the billionaires and the mega corporations funnel into our politics and our government. And until we do that, nothing's really going to get better. And that's why with MCDS and 11 demands, that's at the top. And it needs to be at the top, because if we don't fix that, then nothing's going to get fixed. And we can talk about that and more things out in the call-in, but let me hit the super chats before too much time goes by here. Thanks for the super sticker, D. Marie. Appreciate you. And thanks for the super chat, Wired TARDIS, who says, Crenshaw knows war from tongue-washing the jockstraps of generals and weapons manufacturers. There you go. And thanks for this one, New York Varsity Sports, who says, Crenshaw voted no on the stock trading ban. He is invested in this more than you think. we are not insulting his intelligence, but his integrity. Yeah, and I think you're spot on to see the money, to see that these people, directly or indirectly are getting rich off these wars, literally. And thanks for the super chat from Atomic Yang. Ukraine selling U.S. weapons to Mexico cartel like grenade launchers, says Claudia Scheinbaum. Yeah, I mean, I'm not directly familiar with that one, but that wouldn't surprise me. If there's money in it, they're going to do it. And before we move on, I wanted to quickly plug the latest Substack post on the 11 Demand Substack. So if you go to, got to get the right window up here, to 11demands.org, which is really easy to find. In fact, I think at this point, if you put 11 Demands into any search engine, it'll come up with the site, which I think is pretty cool. And then you go to 11 Demands Substack, which I encourage everyone to sign up for. You'll get occasional posts that I think are pretty good. And this latest one is about corruption. Now, I was listening. I had Spotify playing songs by Edie Brickell, who, I like a lot of her stuff. And I didn't even know this. She was in a group for a while called the Gadabouts with other musicians, Steve Gadd, and other musicians. And I'm looking on the playlist, and they actually have a song called Corruption. I'm like, well, I got to hear that. And the lyrics from the song were like really based. Like the lyrics had like and if you go through this, there are links here. You can play the song yourself and listen to it off YouTube or Spotify. But the lyrics are like, the people don't want war, but the corporations do. They hire politicians to get them to do what they want them to do. They tell us it's a necessity. Put the propaganda on the TV. Corruption. And then I'm saying, everyone gets it. We know we're being lied to. If you did a poll, you'd get people saying, of course, Congress is corrupt. And then the song lyrics go on, you pay your taxes and they give it to the man to buy a bigger gun. Or it slips into the pocket of the mistress at the senator's club. You barely have enough for your rent. Got say no and got no say in how your money is spent. Corruption. And you can read more of the lyrics and you can listen to them yourself. You can and then just to finish up in the post, there's a part in there about how most people do want to do right by their other people, and what 11 Demands is kind of get at is that we need a new kind of politics, not about personalities, left-right parties and drama, but we need a new kind of politics that's laser focused on a set of clear, concise demands, and these demands and solutions that lead us to a better world. And top of the list is fix the corruption. And the other point I like to hit is that issue is, I call it a win-win, because not only is it the necessary fix to the root cause problems, it's also a winning message because everybody sees the corruption, everyone knows it. Everyone wants a government that truly represents them, and it's time for us, the 99%, to come together and demand it. So 11 Demands, please do check it out, and we can talk about that more in call-in.
All right, let's head on over to call in, ladies and gentlemen. That link is pinned at the very top of the chat. I'm going to go ahead and open the room while I'm on the show. And, just to make sure everybody can get in. I always like to do that.
See if I can get in myself.
And you can also, if you come in a little bit later in the show, because the live chat doesn't post immediately, you can find that link to the call-in show at sabbysabs2.com and the passcode, but asking for the passcode. People are already entering the room there. So again, that's sabbysabs2.com. If you want to speak, the way that you will do that is you will raise your hand. Everybody else who's done this, they know this. I just ask that everyone mute yourself when you enter. Please mute yourself. Thank you. So the way that you do that is by raising your hand. So at the bottom of the screen, there's an option to raise your hand. You just select that, and that is how I know who wants to speak. And we'll go ahead and dive in there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And Eric, I will go ahead and make you a co-host. And you can go ahead and mute some people because somebody is not muted.
All right, we'll see you in there.
All right. All right, guys. Again, you can get that link on sabbysabs2.com. I will see you over there. Thank you very much. Okay, cool. Look, good. Everybody's muted. All right, guys. I'll see you over at Call-In. Thank you so much. And tomorrow night, Friday night, I will be live. Luigi Mangioni's trial begins tomorrow. So we will be discussing that as well as other stories. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.